Hello everybody, it's good to see you. Today, we're talking Infinity. That's right, Lorcana's Infinity format. We're going to be discussing all the different decks you might see, how to play them, what's good against them, and what they're good against. And we're just going to do a deep dive into the format itself. So let's just start. Why is it important to learn about Infinity? Well, for starters, it's Lorcana's second format. There are going to always be events going from Infinity, and the evergreen nature of these decks, it'll be important to learn how to play some of them because they're still going to be good years down the line. And beyond that, we have, as of the time of recording this, 2 DLCs within the next month to get ready for that are going to be Infinity. And if that's not enough to convince you, the format itself is just a lot of fun. It's very different. It's very diverse, may not be the correct word for it, especially after this past weekend, but it is very interesting. Let's get into it. So what is the Infinity format? Well, you have access to the full card pool. Currently, in Lorcana's core rotation, we have access to set 5 through set 12. Infinity includes set 1 through 4. Minus one card in particular. Hiram Flaversham has been banned in Infinity, so you cannot include him in your Infinity decks. You can still play him against friends. I don't know if you could call them friends after you play Hiram against them, but yes. And of note, Bucky Squeak Squirrel Tutor is only allowed in the post-errata version, so there's no pre-errata Bucky Unleashed. So there's basically 2 cards banned in Infinity. Infinity has many powerful cards in the format. Cards that are capable of turning an entire game if you do not play around them correctly. Seeing a card like Be Prepared Resolve for the first time will change your outlook on a lot of things. Standard decks get upgraded massively. You will see some familiar faces as we're going through and discussing everything, and they are even better than they are in core. Finally, there's some different decks and playstyles to core. There's going to be some cards that function very differently than our current state of play to the board. There's going to be some alternate win conditions in Infinity that are fairly powerful. Let's get into it. So, Infinity has a different scale of power. I alluded to this earlier, but some of the cards you have in front of you are more powerful than most things we've seen in core rotation. A card like Diablo Devoted Herald, it tells you to have answers in your deck. You have to build around this card just carrying a game in front of you. Be prepared, banish all characters. You're playing against Ruby, they're at 6 ink. You cannot commit to the board without a way to answer this card. A whole new world, allowing a whole new realm of options for the deck playing it to just spam to the board, have a huge field, and they still somehow have a hand behind it while you're sitting there with 7 cards feeling like you have an empty hand. And Tamatoa So Shiny is one of the most noteworthy alternate win conditions in the game. Alternate win conditions, I'm not necessarily meaning, he still obviously gives you lore to win the game. You're not decking your opponent out with Tamatoa. It's not an alternate win condition in that sense. But the item playstyle is very different than anything we have in core, and it's very important to understand how they're attacking and what they're going for with it. While Infinity has a very diverse pool of decks in the format, I think many of them can kind of be put into 4 categories. Here we have Diablo decks, which are mostly related to discard strategies. A lot of Emerald strategies are powerful where discard is removal, and you have a card like Diablo that demands resources by itself to choke your opponent out. Daisy Duck here represents Aggro. Aggro in Infinity is incredibly powerful. You can see decks even faster than ever before, or just an aggro deck that's so hardy that it feels like a standard mid-range at a certain point. Merlin Rabbit is one of the most powerful cards ever printed in Lorcana. He's one of my favorite cards personally, but you can see Rabbit here representing a lot of Amethyst decks where they just have tons of card draw, tons of advantage, and they feel almost inevitable that they're going to hit that 20 lore at some point. Just throwing cards at you turn after turn. And finally, we have Sapphire decks, either being the control voice of the format, or going for a powerful item strategy that not only focuses on controlling the board, but establishing a win condition on the side with the Tamatoa we talked about earlier. There are plenty of other decks outside of these, and there's going to be a lot of decks I miss in discussion today. If you want to hear about any of them, please ask in the comments below. So, let's begin. What all are we talking about today? I'm going to be sharing a deck build or deck builds for particular archetypes. We're going to discuss the play style of those builds, and so if you've never played it before, you kind of have an idea of what they're trying to do. Or if you would like to attempt to play it, here's how the style goes. If you like other decks like this, maybe you'll like this one. I'm going to include matchup information. A lot of this is from personal experience and my own time playing the decks, but there's also statistics and tournament results available. Plenty of statistics I used in writing up all this matchup information for you. And then finally, we're going to have a quick mulligan rundown for every deck. I'm going to explain mostly a blind mulligan, but sometimes I may include cards that you might look for in particular matchups. But since we're covering such a large field today, I think it's best that we go for more ground, and I chose to go for a blind mulligan or a general idea of what you want to mulligan for. This will be a very lengthy video. This is not a post-edit. This is me already predicting this will be a very lengthy video for me, and even for my standards. So be sure to check out the timestamps below, the chapters, anywhere you want to go from here. You should be able to find it. So if you're looking for information on a particular deck, I will not be hurt if you skip ahead to it. But otherwise, let's get into it. Hey guys, full screen Mo coming at you real quick here before we begin. I just wanted to let you guys know, if you enjoy my content, the things I'm doing here, please check out my Discord and my Metafy even if you have the time/means. I do group sessions every week for my subscribers, and I'm going to start doing free group sessions every week for people just in my Discord. So make sure you're here checking the calendar for that. Next Thursday, for the time of release of this video, I will be doing a free class for everybody, so it'll be a seminar style talking about Infinity format. So if you're interested in upping your game just a little bit more, come check it out. Otherwise, y'all enjoy the video. I'll catch you here in small screen mode now. Well, the deck in front of you might look a little familiar. These are the big dogs. This deck was piloted by a wonderful player and a wonderful person, Kurt Spice, to win the Ink Invitational this past weekend as of recording this. And a lot of this deck is going to look very similar to a core dog deck. A large amount of these cards are cards you can play in core. But the cards you don't find in core make all the difference for your matchups here. Let's discuss those just a little bit. Rapunzel, Gifted with Healing. This is a card available since the first chapter. What this card does is when you play this character, you remove up to 3 damage from one of your characters. Draw a card for each 1 damage removed this way. As you notice, this deck is very geared to have 4 willpower bodies or 3 willpower bodies, or in some case, 5, 6, and even 9 willpower bodies. And this means anytime you quest or you challenge with something 3 strength, you are potentially opening yourself up for giving this deck a draw 3 and playing this well-statted character. A terrifyingly powerful card that people are going to have to learn how to play against again. Or learn to play. Setting up Rapunzel traps are a massive function of this deck. And then there's 2 other cards. Let's talk about Piglet, Pooh Pirate Captain. 2-cost inkable, 2/2. 1 quester, kind of. While you have 2 or more other characters in play, this character gains 2 lore. So he's an inkable, 2-cost, 3 quester. A ton of lore density with this card. This card has given me nightmares before. Just an utter powerhouse and just wrapped up in this teeny little package. Terrifying card. And finally, we have Chernabog Evildoer. So this is the namesake of the deck. If you ask anyone out there what this deck is called, this is called Chernadogs. For the Chernabog here, 10 cost uninkable, 9/9 3-quester. If you've never seen this before, you may be thinking, Mo, in what world is this aggro deck supposed to get up to 10 ink? And you're not. For each character card in your discard, you pay 1 less to play this character. And then when you play this character, shuffle all character cards from your discard into your deck. So this has a ton of synergy with cards like Tramp, Street Smart Dog, Bobby Zimmerowski, and just in general a long game going on. This is oftentimes a win condition for this deck if your opponent is not playing a particular kind of removal. Either Ruby or perhaps Emerald can deal with this card on occasion, or I guess Amber has World's Greatest. But still, if they do not have the answer, this card will end the game by himself. A massive powerhouse of a card. It says, if you be prepared me and wipe my board, next turn I'm going to establish this 9/9 3-quester that you have to deal with. And a lot of times he gets played for free. I've seen multiple of these played in a game. So what do we have in front of us? What is this deck? This is a aggro deck, a very aggressive deck. Plays almost like Zoo, if you're familiar with the term from other card games. You want to swarm the board. This deck utilizes my bodyguard theory, in that if you have more characters in play than your opponent, every one of your characters has bodyguard printed on them. So that means one of your characters will be protected at the end of the day. So you can squeeze more lore out by using sheer numbers to your advantage. This deck uses a new card from set 12, Dale, ready for his shot. During challenges, your characters deal damage with their willpower instead of their strength. This card flips the board on certain matchups. It turns your Daisy Duck into a 4/4, Nala a 4/4, Ursula a 3/3, Rapunzel a 5/5, Tramp a 6/6. My gosh, just a super powerful card here. Really changes the format, and honestly, a lot of how these aggro mirrors will shape up. This deck, in the way that it's currently built, constructed, is one of the best choices to enter any event in. The numbers support this statement. This deck has very few bad matchups, and in most cases can just power through those bad matchups. It is so incredibly powerful. Even into other variations of Lemon Lime aggro, I think the Dale and the faster, more aggressive board can overcome other decks we're about to talk about. If you are looking for a deck to find success with, this is definitely one of them. There is a skill cap to this deck. There is going to take some nuance and some games behind it. A good player making good decisions on your inking when you're going to play. This deck can establish a 10 wide board with 2 ink. It takes some experience to get used to it. It's not your everyday aggro, but once you do get used to it, it is absolutely mighty. The last card we'll discuss in this is Kurt included 3 copies of Horseman Strikes, 3-cost inkable. Draw a card. You may banish chosen character with evasive. Such a high-costed action, not a song, in this deck. You may wonder why. Well, Maui Shark is a massive presence in Infinity, and this card helps flip the tide on that and allows you to quest in front of him. And there's a few other evasives you can hit as well, but Shark is really the one we're looking at. Now, what do we have here? This is the Snowfort deck. You may have heard whispers of how much this deck has been doing in testing scenes, just behind the scenes, because there's not been a chance to play this, really. This is the Snowfort Mulan aggro deck, an incredibly powerful archetype. So how is this different from the archetype above? Well, it all comes down to Mulan. 2-cost inkable, 1/4. When this character quests, gain lore equal to her strength to a maximum of 6 lore. So she quests for 1 anyways with her 1 strength, but if you have a Snowfort in play, that gives her an extra lore, and that also makes her very difficult to deal with. Resist +1 on a 1/4 body is a lot. Once you have 2 Snow Fort downs, she avoids most ruby removal without an additional help. This deck just overwhelms your opponent on sheer stats. Being able to go something like Daisy, Willow, Daisy, Snow Fort is just a lethal line into a lot of decks. And you have never been more frustrated than trying to take down a Tramp Street Smart dog that has resist +1 and has higher stats. You may notice the exclusion of Dale in my list here. I think Dale is an absolutely fine card to play in this deck, but it has some counter synergies with Snow Fort, and you just do not want your curve to be too high up. I did not value Dale more than Rapunzel, Lady, Tramp, or Snow Fort itself in this build. Why would you play this over the other one? Different matchup spread. Really, not a whole lot different, but this one is a little bit more resilient to steel and has some counters to ruby removal, especially Sisu-based decks. And it does pretty well into most other aggro decks, besides this one. The Turn-a-Dog deck kind of wins this mirror very hard. Dale plus going wide is just overcomes the Snow Fort deck too quickly. The resist one doesn't matter when your opponent's swinging a 6/6 Tramp into your cards and then drawing with the Rapunzel. It can even be a downside at times. Still to be said, a very powerful archetype. So, what does the matchup spread look like for these decks? Well, here we go. Favored. So 2 notable examples of decks you're favored into. Ruby Amethyst is, at least from both personal experience and somewhat statistics I have available through tournament data or whatever, I think either one of these dog decks is pretty favored into Ruby Amethyst. You just overwhelm the board. And there's too many characters for them to challenge that they get to just aggro you out before you can even begin to start taking them down. Cards like Dale or Snow Fort really just throw off your math and make the games really difficult. And if you're trying to go into the late game, Lady 5 cost is there just to give them infinite resources. I think Steel Song, Ruby Amethyst and Steel Song are 2 of the most played decks in Infinity, and this deck preys on both of them. Preys on the predators of the format, because Steel Song's removal just isn't good enough into these decks, and that's wild to think about. And I'm not saying you can't ever win with either of these decks into the dogs, it's just very difficult. Something else you're going to notice as we're moving through today is this deck has a good matchup into most things. The format is very heavily weighted in dog's advantage. This is definitely less of a call to action or anything of the sort. The deck is very powerful, but hopefully we will see some innovations occur that take advantage of the weaknesses it has. So what is a weakness here? I think Prince John decks can take some of the vulnerability from these aggro decks and turn it against them. So they get to be pretty low on cards in hand before they play their first Tramp, and Prince John is fantastic at taking advantage of Tramp, either through discarding Tramp from the hand so he could never be played, or when you play Tramp, you draw and discard for each of your characters. That Prince John is going to draw a whole bunch of cards. In testing, I've had Prince John and our friend Diablo on the board against this deck, and I've drawn an unreasonable amount of cards. But the truth at the end of the day is, despite this slight vulnerability, well, not slight, glaring vulnerability, sometimes the cards just don't do it. You could have 20 cards in your hand and you're never piercing that Snow Fort's defense. You're never piercing that huge dog board. But I do think Prince John, Diablo are a start. Diablo is just virtually not super touchable. There's Finnick in both of these lists. Finnick is a 1-cost inkable, 1/2, 1 quester. When you play this character, you may pay 2 to return chosen opposing character with 2 strength or less to that player's hand. So you can bounce the Diablo, but there's no real way to get rid of the Diablo. So you will see a ton of cards in these matchups, and sometimes it'll be enough, especially because Emerald has muses. But it's not always going to get you there against these boards. So how do we mulligan this deck? It's really easy, and I can kind of combine both of them into one. For either deck, you're looking for a 1-drop. I think the most ideal 1-drop for either of these decks to lead off with is going to be Lady. What this does is it checks your opponent in a way that if they're playing Sapphire or a deck that is unable to threaten your Lady on their turn 1, you get to threaten a quest for 3 and perhaps more eventually. But that's a lot of lore to start the game off with. And then you also establish the shift target that is integral for your game plan moving forward. But any 1-drop typically works here. You just want a body. And then on turn 2, you're going to look for either deck. Could look for Grandmother Willow. This powerful set 11 card says 2 cost uninkable, 1/2, 1 quester, terrible stats. Once during your turn, you pay 1 less for the next character you play this turn. Super strong effect. Every time, one of the craziest ways to look at this card is every time you play a character with her effect, you basically, it says draw a card in a weird way, because you do not need that ink to move forward. So if you're using that to cheapen a character, she basically says draw a card. Massively overpowered card. It can allow for some powerful plays like a turn 3 Tramp even. And then the Snowfort deck does like to establish an early Mulan. If you get the early Mulan down against a Sapphire deck, it is often just too much for them to come back from. Being hit for 6 lore in the early game is not a wonderful game mechanic to be dealing with if you're trying to ramp. A lot of Infinity Sapphire decks will attempt to solitaire the board for a few turns, so they'll look to play a Popsicle, maybe a Bell if they're lucky. Ramp on turn 2, turn 3, they want to play their first character to the board usually, and sometimes that character cannot even stat check a Mulan without a Snowfort, so this card is devastating to those decks, as well as being very powerful in general. A 1/4 stat line can survive a lot of removal. And then on turn 3, you typically would like to play Nani and just add an extra card. Drawing cards is so powerful in these decks because A, you don't have a lot of great ways to draw cards, but B, you get to play nearly every card you draw. Draw is more powerful in a deck like this than it is in a deck like Ruby Amethyst, for example, because you can, at any given moment, unload your whole hand in no time. And with the lore density being so heavily gated into the early game, it makes every card you get very powerful. And then Snowfort is sometimes a decent turn 3 play. Sometimes it can just overwhelm your opponent, just start questing with a Daisy or a Mulan, and a Snowfort is just too much for them to deal with. And then finally, I am almost always keeping Tramp, even blind. Let's just say I have an opener and I don't have a 1-drop in my hand. I have a Tramp. I'm probably going to keep that Tramp and send everything else back. It's just that powerful of a card. Tramp Street Smart Dog just alters the way the game is played in a huge level for these decks. Cultivating the perfect cards in your hand is absolutely devastating in the hands of the right player. This card is huge, which brings us to our next point. Should Tramp go to the pound? It's no secret, and especially if you're paying attention to any Lorcana social media realms, that people are having a call to action. Should Tramp be banned? My personal opinion on the card is different in my opinion on bans. So that's to say, I don't need to be the one to say a card should be banned. I'm not a game designer. I play the game. I will play the game in whatever way, shape, or form they present it to me, and I'll do my best to play into this massively powerful card. I do think when you compare Tramp on the scale of cards that have been banned or permanently basically removed from the game in the case of Bucky here, I think Tramp is more broken than Hiram Flaversham. Forgive me for such a hot take this early in the video, and I'll explain myself very briefly here. I think Hiram is a card that is incredibly powerful. He's just an eternal draw engine. He's a death knell to see if you're playing a discard related strategy in a lot of ways. He's just so hard to deal with. But there's a lot of vulnerabilities that every deck can take advantage of when your opponent's playing Hiram. If you're playing against a Sapphire strategy that goes whatever on 1, ramp on 2, Hiram on 3, they've basically solitaired for 3 straight turns. And of course a bell really changes the math here a little bit, but the 1/6 body, 4-cost Singer is relevant, yes, but the 1/6 body you can just take advantage of. You can take advantage that your opponent wants to use this to draw and say, you can have as many cards as you want in your hand. I'm going to quest out with a snow fort in front of me, and you're going to have a hard time regaining tempo after this moment. Blue-red with Be Prepared is obviously something you have to take into account. Comparing Hiram to Tramp, I think Tramp has far less counterplay. The counterplay to Tramp is one of 2 attacks. 1, you attack the board. You remove your opponent's characters. This is something every deck is doing every game. You are always attacking your opponent's board. If you have removal, you're going to use it on opponent's characters. There's the Tramp's condition of paying 1 less for each character you have in play effectively it's not changing the game. It's not changing the decisions you would make with your removal. You're still going to use it when you can or when you need to. And I think that brings a little bit of a toxic point to the game that if you don't have that removal, or if you're playing a deck that's not perhaps in Steel or Ruby where you could out your opponent's cards each and every turn, Tramp's very hard to avoid. It's very hard to stop this card from coming down in a lot of ways, especially even if you're playing Steel and your opponent just plays a bunch of 4 health characters. What are you supposed to do against Tramp? Or if they go first and go 1-drop Willow 1-drop and threaten the turn 3 Tramp. When discussing counterplay for this card, I mean, obviously, discard can be effective. You can just rip him from your opponent's hand and call it a day. But discard's really only available in, 2 colors? Emerald and Amber? And a lot of discard is just flat out unplayable, especially if you're not playing a Prince John deck. So I don't really want to put discard as a counter, but we will say it is kind of a counter to Tramp. It is a way to hit him, stop him from coming to the board, which is fantastic to have that as an option. And you may say, Mo, what is that doing? Hiram's going to draw you 1,000,000 cards. Yes, Hiram will, but Tramp lets you filter through and find these powerful cards to go from your next turn. If you use Tramp and add a Snow Fort, it feels worse than Tramp adding a Chromacon and Core. If you go Tramp, add Chernabog to set up a counterplay to your counterplay. All I'm saying on Tramp here, and I want everyone to forgive me for this, I don't typically like being a hot takes merchant, but he's very difficult to play around, and in the correct hands, Tramp is a bit more devastating. In verdict, though, I think there's always going to be a most powerful card in the game. There always will. It'll be Diablo some games, some days it'll be Maui Shark even, some days it'll be Hiram Flaversham, or Bell, or Bucky. There will always be a best card in the game. And even though Tramp does not have a lot of counterplay, I do think it's incorrect to call for bans, especially so early into a format or even so close to a DLC. It would be very controversial for this card to be removed from the game. If you forced me to make a decision on my own and said, hey, you're in charge of game design for today, you have to make a call on Tramp, and that's what we're going to do, I would probably remove him for a healthier game. Maybe not this close to a DLC. I do think Infinity is about playing the powerful cards, but you want it to be a healthy format. And dogs are shaping up to be incredibly overpowered. My overall thought on dogs is they are currently looking to be the deck to beat going into these DLC tournaments. And if you're just looking to play Infinity for the first time, be ready for this deck. Moving forward, well, look who's here. If you have dogs, we might as well talk about the other post-rotation deck that has found a ton of success, that can migrate very well to Infinity. Here we have one of my favorite players in the game has been so kind to release a Blurple list that people can play with. This is such a powerful deck and such a powerful take into the Infinity format. Fun story here, there are only 8 Infinity cards in this deck, but they are doozies. And to be fair, one of them enables 2 post-rotation cards to find success in this, but Popsicle. 1-cost inkable item. When you play this item, you may draw a card, and then you can banish this item to remove up to 2 damage from chosen character. This card is no stranger to most anyone who has played Lorcana for any period of time. A powerful draw engine with previously Hiram, but now Tamatoa happy as a clam. Being able to play the Popsicle Tamatoa engine in this deck gives you tons of late game recursion with that, and the Junior Woodchuck guidebook. It's just a very powerful engine here, where this one card enables you to play not only Tamatoa, but Bell, Apprentice Inventor. This card is a 3-cost inkable, 3/3, 1-quester. Effect is, during your turn, you may banish chosen item of yours to play this character for free. Free is powerful. If you learn anything from our discussion today, understand free is power. Being able to put Bell on the board early can help keep aggro decks in check to a certain degree, but it also establishes a singer for our only other Infinity card in this deck, Friends on the Other Side. Oh, this is a set 1 classic, one of my favorite cards in the entire game. Fun story, this is the first card, actually, I obtained foil. So I got my darling wife got this for me from locals before we left for our first DLC back in Vegas. So I had a set of foil Friend on the Other Side. That was cool. But 3-cost inkable song, just simple as anything. It says draw 2 cards. So you can play Belle on turn 1. She can sing Friends on the Other Side on turn 2. That can help you dig for ramp if you didn't already have it. Why is this making a splash in Infinity if it's practically a core deck? Well, there's a few really powerful reasons. Merryweather, a set 12 card, 4-cost inkable, 4/5, ward, 1-quester. Very simple. But this ward is so powerful in Infinity. It shuts down a lot of steel-based removal, and it just is a threatening body to throw into whatever you need it to. Scuttle, 5-cost inkable, 5/5, 2-quester. Another powerful warded body to help keep these steel decks in check and just provide a powerful chokehold on the board. So, what is Blurple? What kind of deck is this? This is going to be a very mid-range strategy that can play pretty controlling, but you're honestly looking to hit a point where you're able to tempo out the board and start questing for huge chunks of lore at a time. Say you go Genie, 4-cost, 2/4, 2-quester, into Elsa, into Demona, clear your opponent's board. Well, then you have 5 lore on the board. If you play a Hades on the next turn, you can quest for 5, the next turn quest for 7, and then you have the game locked up after that. Blurple chunks lore so very quickly here. Since you have such an advantageous matchup into the steel decks, you find yourself able to play a card like Dumbo with the 3/3 stat line, which is pretty terrible for Infinity. But since you have so many other things that give you strength, you can whittle your opponent's resources down and then establish a Dumbo in the late game, and that card can carry you to victory. It should be no surprise this deck is doing well in Infinity with how powerful it has looked in core since set 9. Now, let's talk matchups. Blurple finds itself favored into Amber Steel, for example. You have a great way to play into Amber Steel's removal. It is so hard to deal with a Merryweather, into a Scuttle, into a Demona. This used to be an incredibly Amber Steel favored matchup where they were able to sing a whole new world and flip the entire table on all the cards Blurple has managed to accumulate over the course of the game. But now, Blurple's able to play to the board a lot more aggressively. They don't need as many cards in hand. They can just continuously play huge characters turn after turn, play a vase of characters that dodge Rapunzel. Gives it a great matchup into any steel deck. And then I have Prince John here to represent discard once again, because Blurple deals with discard in a huge manner. You're just able to outdraw the discard with cards like Dumbo, cards like Genie, Demona, these huge draw engines. It's just so hard to stay ahead of the game if your opponent's trying to discard you down. To make matters worse, Demona turns your Prince John sideways, turns all of your warded characters sideways so you can take them out. There's no Muse Bounce shenanigans here that can save you. Demona destroys every warded character and makes it so hard to find a foothold in this matchup. This is generally a very safe deck, so even matchups that might not be the most favored, take Red-Blue for example. Red-Blue versus Blurple used to be, in my opinion, fairly Red-Blue favored, but Blurple can turn the tides on that in no time now with cards like Demona. Just throwing out huge board after huge board and just having the draw to never run out of steam is terrifying. But some matchups that can take advantage of Blurple, I think Lemon Lime Aggro is huge into this deck. If you are playing a Sapphire deck and if you miss Bell, if you do not find Bell in this list, a lot of times the damage is just going to be done by the time you hit the board. You don't have a sweeper, you don't have a way to deal with a wide board. You could play something like Monstro, which is a fairly inefficient card in a lot of ways in this deck. And sometimes it's just not even enough because you don't have enough cards to discard. Lemon Lime Aggro can take a huge advantage of this deck, and the Snowfort deck can sometimes put themselves out of range for your removal or for your huge characters. And a card like Demona just reloading their hand is just terrible. Blue-green, we'll get into that deck here in a minute, but I think blue-green items gives Blurple a notoriously hard time in that Blurple is not quite fast enough to threaten this deck before it can start getting its engine off, and once the engine starts getting rolling, it's going to find its way to the inevitable Tamatoa Dime in-game, and Blurple does not have a lot of great ways to interact. You can play cards like Cusco or Hideaway to try to make this matchup better, but those find themselves being dead into other matchups. Anyways, Ed's List is a great place to start, just to say, and then you can look to tech into any of your weaker matchups as you go along. Just a very resilient deck without a ton of exploitable matchups. And then I have Genie and Elsa off to the side saying, yep, we're still good. Turn 3 Genie into turn 4 Elsa is powerful in whatever format you're going to play it in. So let's talk mulligan with this deck. Turn 1, you're always looking to play a Popsicle. It is the only one-cost thing in this entire deck. And then if you happen to find the combo of Popsicle plus Bell, congratulations, you have a huge lead onto the game. More importantly than Popsicle Bell, but I still would find myself basically always keep Popsicle. I am usually leaning to never keeping Bell unless I already have Ramp or unless I have Popsicle. The most important factor is hitting your turn 2 Ramp, Sail the Azurite Sea, or Tipo Growing Sun, just to get you to playing those 4-cost characters so much faster. You notice in Ed's List, outside of Bell and I guess Friends on the Other Side, maybe Guidebook, there's not a lot of great turn 3 plays. There's no Cheshire Cat here, so we're not hedging. We want to find Ramp in nearly every game we play. And then your turn 3 would love to play a 4-cost character. Generally, depending on the matchup, could be a Genie if you just want to establish a character that floats. Floating is the process of a character replacing itself on play, so Genie gets to draw a card on play, he floats. Or Merryweather if you're into a deck that you need those extra combat stats, or perhaps to survive your opponent's vicious removal. And then from here out, you're just looking to play the strongest card or cards in your hand for the remainder of the game. A fairly simple mulligan here, Ramp above all, and then Popsicle Bell, and then 4-cost character in that priority. I do think this deck is an absolute terror to the format. Its matchups aren't as impressive as they are in core, but they are still very strong, and this is something to be prepared for. Speaking of be prepared, here's an all too familiar face. Ruby Amethyst is so back. If you've only played the game since rotation, if you've only played core, if you're a newer player, Ruby Amethyst might be an archetype you really haven't come across an awful lot. It's always been kind of a fringe deck, tier 2.5-ish kind of deck. Never too bad, but also never really just finding its way into the meta. What if I told you this was the most dominant deck for years? This could very well lay a claim to be the Lorcana GOAT deck if we only counted pre-rotation. What boosts does this deck get from Infinity? I think this deck gets not only one, but two of the most powerful cards in the game into it. You have Be Prepared, 7 cost, uninkable song, banish all characters. Iconic Lorcana card, one of the most powerful cards ever printed. Just so strong to have that board reset, and in the hands of a very competent player, can just absolutely decimate your opponent's chances of winning. And then the other card, Merlin Rabbit, 4 cost, uninkable, 2/3. When you play this character, and when he leaves play, you may draw a card. Simple, but so strong of an effect. A few other cards you may not, there's quite a few cards actually you may not be familiar with. We have Madam Mim, Snake, and Fox. Both of them share the same effect of when you play this character, banish her, or return another chosen character of yours to your hand. Can you believe Madam Mim Snake, a 2 cost inkable 3/3, was once overstated? We've gotten over that now, but truly the bounce is a beneficial effect, as this deck is going to show you. And then Madam Mim Fox, a 4/3 rush character. So strong. I have maximized on these bounce effects, and I've also included a rather deep Merlin line for you're going to see for these decks, especially if you see other Infinity Red Purple lists. I have 3 Merlin Crabs, 3/3 inkable 1 quester. When you play this character and when he leaves play, chosen character gains Challenger +3 this turn. I think this is massive for turning the tide on these Snowfort decks, or perhaps these Chernadog decks in general with these big willpower board. You just want a character that gives you the combat stats to go on about your day and continue punishing. Merlin Goat, 4 cost inkable 4/3. When you play this character and when he leaves play, gain 1 lore. Why is a burn card in my control deck? That's what Ruby Amethyst is. It is a control deck. Some people can call it mid-range, some people can call it tempo. I play this deck like I am a control player. I play to the late game every game, and I think this is one of the strongest late game decks that Lorcana has ever seen. But why is there a burn card in my control deck? It just gives you the sense of inevitability. If you are playing a game and it goes on to so many turns, you are just going to chip away at your opponent and eventually just spell their absolute doom with a card like Merlin Goat. Bouncing him for Fox or Snake and just constantly chipping lore every time he hits the board is huge. Continuing on, the majority of this deck has been rotated out cards. We have the Amethyst 1-drops, Magic Broom, and Chernabog followers, each capable of drawing a card on quest or on other character play. We see Brawl, 3 cost inkable removal, banish chosen character with 2 strength or less. This in combination with the new Jebediah Farnsworth from set 12, 2 cost inkable, 3/3, evasive reckless, are to hold Diablo down to stop them from punishing you for all these powerful draw cards you have. And then we have Maui Hero to All, 5 cost inkable, 6/5, Rush Reckless, just one of the best bodies Lorcana has ever seen. This removal does not care about your Snowfort half the time, unless it's Tramp, of course, but Maui can just do some huge damage and just piece apart boards by himself. And then, of course, we have friends on the other side, and you'll probably be seeing this in every purple deck we talk about today. So, I already said this is a control deck. You're going to play this deck to play for the late game. One of the newest combos involves Scrooge McDuck, Ghostly Ebenezer, 2-cost uninkable, 3/3. Boost 1, so you get to boost is to pay 1 ink, and then you put the top card of your deck under this character. And this character gets +1 strength and +1 willpower for each card under him. This is so strong when combined with the Madam Mim cards. You get to turn this into draw out of nowhere. You get to have this powerful scaling body that you can cash in for cards at any point that you choose. But really, this deck, you're looking to just check your opponent, make efficient quests, and by efficient quests, I mean quests that your opponents are going to have to trade into, chip lore as you go, and then look to have a board wipe turn followed up by perhaps 2 locations. Queen's Castle, there is a popular card in these builds. I've left it out because I don't feel like it helps your worst matchups, but I think it makes your better matchups better. Anyways, that's for you to decide how you want to build your Ruby Amethyst deck. This is mine. And I have some controversial decisions in here, like Demona and Merlin Rabbit. Do you play both? They're very counterintuitive cards in a way. Rabbit is always trying to keep your hand healthy, bouncing Rabbit, keeping him in play. Demona, however, wants you to have 3 or less cards in your hand. This current iteration of Ruby Amethyst, I think, is very powerful to be able to go for both. And so, against the aggro decks, you're looking to play Rabbit. You're looking to go for that line. Against the control decks, you're looking to play every card in your hand. You're wanting to show them why purple is so inevitable, because you're going to have card after card after card coming their way, and it's just going to be too much lore for decks to out-control you. And I think a card like Demona is perfect for that. You may have some awkward hands, but remember, for some reason, Demona is inkable. Take that as you will. But I think this card just gives you powerful edges over some matchups that might be teetering one way or the other without her. I wouldn't be upset for you running 2 or 3. I mean, even 0, it's not the end of the world. You notice this deck is missing the Lady in Red Dresses, the Madame Medusa, banish chosen character of 3 strength or less, or Lady Tremaine, your opponent chooses a character to banish. And I did that largely to keep the uninkable count smooth, but also because I wanted to play Merlin Rabbit. I feel like this card is that powerful in here. So let's talk some Ruby Amethyst matchups. I think for starters, you see our boy Prince John back again. Ruby Amethyst beats discard hard. Whether you're bouncing your Scrooge McDuck to avoid giving them Diablo draws, or you're just playing a Merlin Rabbit or a Demona to keep your hand out of range of this character being able to rip every card from you. I think it just is so hard to come back as the discard deck. I think you're favored into Ruby Sapphire. I know some statistics could lead to the opposite. I do think this matchup could be a very large skill check between 2 control players playing it out, utilizing every resource to their advantage here. This matchup is why I love Infinity, because it can make or break depending on the quality of player. But I do think Ruby Amethyst can just out-eke control from Ruby Sapphire. I do think the 2 different versions of Ruby Sapphire, if you're playing against the Maui Shark version, I lean towards Ruby Amethyst being favored, but if you're playing the item version, it can be a lot closer, whereas items are just as inevitable as purple cards. They have just the draw, and they will eventually find their way to reach that Tamatoa dime. Ruby Amethyst kind of is another all-rounder here. It has very few huge vulnerabilities to itself. Some unfavored matchups. Look who it is. Tramp is back again, and this one is a big one. Ruby Amethyst is one of the most played decks, historically in Lorcana, and from what we've seen so far into looking at Set 12 Infinity tournaments. I think the Chernadog deck and even the Snowfort deck just have the ability to go wide too fast, while also having multiple answers to be prepared. in the form of Ursula, Mowgli, or even a card like Lenny could just really turn this matchup absolutely on its head. And even if you get the Be Prepared down, they have the means to recover and still put out lore every turn. And it's very difficult for Ruby Amethyst to play around Rapunzel appropriately. Boosting a Scrooge McDuck to the absolute moon is one of my ways to play around Rapunzel, but sometimes when you're boosting him, you can't also establish another character, and you kind of just have to match characters. You have to go blow for blow with them and make the most out of each and every character you play. I also think Ruby Amethyst finds itself unfavored into other Merlin Goat decks. Green Purple Tempo, for example, a deck I'm well known for, or Purple Steel, perhaps. These decks are just a little bit faster than Ruby Amethyst, and the inevitability in the card economy of Amethyst actually comes back to bite Ruby Amethyst because they're just a little bit slower, a little bit. These can also be a very skillful display between two players, and another reason why I absolutely adore this format. Overall, Ruby Amethyst does very well all around and is a very safe pick. Just beware the dog matchup. Dogs have a lot of favorable matchups, and sometimes the best way to beat the deck is avoid it, which is what you're hoping to do with Ruby Amethyst. There could also be some tech cards that could change the matchup for sure. How can you have a deck with Merlin Rabbit and Be Prepared and not be one of the most powerful decks ever? Your mulligan with Ruby Amethyst is relatively simple. Your turn 1, you want a 1-drop. You can use these 1-drops to check your opponent's board. You can use them to fix a bricked hand on Uninkables. There's a lot you can do with these. Keep in mind, Merlin Crab boosting a Magic Broom or boosting a Chernobog Followers can allow these little guys to get over the big aggro bodies that you need them to. Turn 2, almost always you would love to play a Scrooge McDuck. So I find myself mulliganing pretty hard for this card in a lot of scenarios. I have built my Ruby Amethyst deck to be, let's just count them real quick, 4, 8, 12 Uninkables, which is a little bit on the low side for having all this draw power. And a large reason for that is how much I want to see this card every game. The earlier you get this card established, the stronger he gets to become. Finally, on turn 3, a lot of times you're looking for curves, so you're looking for a Madame Mim Fox or a Merlin Crab to get established. Why? It's a 3-cost body to sing your friends on the other side. But it is notable that you can boost with Scrooge McDuck to be a 4/4. You can swing him in, quest him, do whatever, but you can also bounce him with a Madame Mim Snake on the turn and effectively get a cheeky little draw one without sacrificing a ton of stats to the board on the early turns of a game. Some matchups, especially in the discard related ones, this is your bread and butter play. You just want to get a little bit of value each and every turn out of this Scrooge. My overall thoughts on Ruby Amethyst is it is a very strong deck. It will also be an incredibly popular deck. Make sure you're very confident in mirror matches as well as your game plan for dogs moving forward. If I'm a dog player, I'm looking to prey on a deck like Ruby Amethyst, and so have your countermeasures ready however you find them. Well, speaking of countermeasures, what am I doing here? So Yellow-Purple is a deck that's finding a decent amount of success in Infinity. I think there are 2 builds to attack from with it. You can either look for a tempo-based build where you're looking to cheat out strong characters as early as turn 2 with the Cinderella or Angel singing Akud et Amuti. Song that's taken over core play. You pay 2 less for the next character you play this turn, draw a card. This allows you to do something like open up Cinderella, sing this on turn 2, and start the game off with a 4-cost character. Or save it in turn 5. This deck that I have built here is focused on patching up a tough matchup for Yellow-Purple, which I believe is Steel Song. I think Steel Song often gives Yellow-Purple a decently hard time with ways to punish each and every direction you go here. But you may notice a very familiar card here. Ursula, Sea Witch Queen. I love this card so much. Everyone always talks, what's your favorite villain in Lorcana? I'm going to be honest with you. I loved Little Mermaid. Hated Ursula growing up. Just a terrifying character. Lorcana, I learned, Cinderella's kind of the bad guy, and Ursula's who saves me from her. 7 cost Inkable, 4/7, 3 quester, shift 5. Whenever this character quests, exert chosen character. And more importantly, other characters cannot exert to sing songs. This shuts down so many strategies. Steel Song, Green Steel, most Steel decks, Lemon Lime discard, a lot of Prince John decks. This just absolutely shuts down and just puts a huge body on the board that says, you've got to deal with me, or I'm going to win the game with this. I'm going to turn everything of yours sideways while questing for 3. I have removal. I have everything I could want in the world. You see this deck also utilizing Dale, turning Ursula into a 7/7, Rapunzel into a 5/5. It just keeps going. I have 3 copies of Ohana Means Family. Remove all damage from chosen character of yours. Draw a card for each 1 damage removed this way, because I thought 4 Rapunzels wasn't enough. I wanted to play 7. Not that Ohana is the same. We have a lot of character reduction. We're always paying full cost for our actions. Still to be said, we can draw a lot of cards with this, which gives us that inevitability that we're missing out by not playing a card like Goat here. Another new card that I've found really enjoyable in this deck, even in Infinity, is Mrs. Incredible. At the start of your turn, you may choose 1. This character gains evasive until your next turn, or you can choose to give this character +1 lore to your next turn. On a 5/6 body, either one of those things are absolutely incredible. We're just going to sustain through whatever our opponent's throwing at us and just have these huge bodies on board. Bare Necessities is an important shout out for all these Infinity cards. Chosen opponent, 2 cost Inkable Song. Chosen opponent reveals their hand and discards a non-character card of your choice. If it's coming up on that Be Prepared turn, you can rip it. If you're playing against Steel Song, you can rip the song that's going to threaten your characters. Whatever you need, it's got you covered there. Very solid deck. Let's look at another way to run yellow purple, and that is Monstro Combo. This is a deck that should not be too surprised to see in Infinity. I think there's quite a few ways to run Monstro in Infinity. There is some really cool ways to find it in purple. If you don't know what this combo does, essentially you're trying to get a dry Monstro on board, and then you move him into your Great Illuminary location, which says characters here gain, exert, draw a card. This is not a once per turn effect, so you can combo that with Monstro's effect, choose and discard a card, ready this character. He can't quest for the rest of this turn. Why would you want to do that? You're going to deck yourself out, believe it or not. Why would you want to deck yourself out? Because of We Know the Way, a very interesting card that has not seen a lot of love before this archetype was born. But this card says, shuffle chosen card from your discard into your deck, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's the same name as the chosen card, you may play the revealed card for free. Otherwise, put it into your hand. If you utilize this card with nothing in your deck, you get to essentially choose a card from your discard to play for free. In comes Alanadale. 4 cost Inkable, 2/3. Whenever you play a song, gain 1 lore. Okay, so how do we play enough songs to make this into an OTK? Well, We Know the Way can also choose We Know the Way. So if you have a We Know the Way in the discard, you can use 1 in your hand on the other We Know the Way and loop them 20 times in a turn to gain 20 lore with Alanadale and in the game. A very strong archetype that gets boosted by quite a few Infinity cards, Cinderella being a huge one. Friends on the Other Side to see your stuff more consistently, but also give you that extra little edge with Monstro. And then a card that I find myself really partial to is 0 to Hero. Count the number of 2 cost Uninkable Song. Count the number of characters you have in play. You may pay that amount of ink less for the next character you play this turn. So if you're looking to play a Monstro, you can have 4 ink and 4 characters on board, sing the song, play him on turn 5. Wow. If you have a way to cheat out characters, perhaps with Ham, you can get him out even sooner. Just a very strong way to push your Monstro onto the board even sooner and before your opponent has access to all their removal and outs to him. Very cool deck. Can find its way into some vulnerabilities through either inconsistencies or bad matchups, but definitely think it's worth mentioning today. Let's talk matchups. I think both of these decks are favored into Amber Steel and kind of steel removal in general. One deck has Monstro, the other deck has Ursula, just to help you against all these song decks. Prince John. Now this one's a little bit different. I think the very first yellow-purple deck, the one with the Ursula in the deck and all the draw cards, has a very favorable Prince John matchup, largely because of all the purple cards. The second one, the Monstro deck can be a little trickier because Prince John can force you to discard a powerful combo piece, or perhaps we don't talk about Bruno hitting your Monstro could just end a game on the spot. But you still play purple cards, you still play Demona. It's going to end up feeling pretty favored in the long run. Unfavored. Look who it is. Lemon Lime Aggro. Yeah, nothing super crazy here. Both of these decks are going for the song approach as opposed to the body approach, and even the body approach is not the best way of dealing with these decks because that requires you to see Dale in a timely manner. But I think Lemon Lime Aggro can just go a bit too wide and punish you in too many ways. The Monstro deck, oddly enough, has a better, cleaner matchup into this because you can establish your Monstro to the board. He can hit your opponent's characters and you can ready him, and they don't have a way to interact. And then you can just win the game on the next turn, which allows you to close out a little bit faster. But overall, I think the consistency of the Chernadog deck and the sheer power of it gives it just a little edge into the matchup. And then I think Ruby Sapphire gives both of these decks a hard time because they don't necessarily care about your character's stats. Be Prepared does not care about your 4/7 Ursula. It does not care about your 6/8 Monstro. It just eliminates you from the board. The more Sisu structured decks will be a little bit more interesting of a matchup, depending on the Sapphire Coil or whatever else they have in play to reduce it. But overall, I think it's pretty safe to say Red-Blue is unfavored. Red-Purple not as much, because Red-Purple is a little bit slower to get to those board wipe turns, whereas Red-Blue rushes out just as fast as you do. And then a little shout out to Dale here. As you probably already know from playing Core, Dale turning your Elsa, Spirit of Winter, or Elsa the Fifth Spirit, into a 5/5 rush evasive character that inserts something on play is truly one of the most powerful things you can do in Lorcana. You can tap down a steel 5-cost beast with this and run it down on turn 4. Quick shout out that both of these decks play Lantern, a 2-cost item, and if you run into item hate, which is abundant in Infinity, more so than it is in Core, it could give you a hard time. The mulligan for this deck is not too complex. You really look for Cinderella or perhaps Angel if you're on the draw, and you want to combine Cinderella with another song, so a Cinderella plus a Cood here lets you have that turn 2 4-cost character. I think this is probably the only deck in the game that can play a unshifted 4-cost character on 2. Even still, it just letting you skip out that much faster is very powerful. Just playing a genie on turn 2 can just end the game before your opponent deals with them in a timely manner. But if you can't find that, a Lantern is good enough, or perhaps a Ham, depending on the build. The first build does not have Ham, but the second one does, to be able to play a 4-cost character on turn 3, at the very least. You see, there are 3 foxes, and 3 foxes in each of these lists here, so there's a little bit of a backup play on turn 3 if you need to, but really, you want to do what this deck is strong at, which is playing 4-cost characters early, playing your big characters early. Now, I saved it, but I really wanted to discuss one of my favorite lines of this deck. Songs are so strong in Infinity. Core songs are very strong. Songs are one of the strongest things in Lorcana. Infinity makes core songs look like nothing. This line here counters all of that. Counters it all. You go Ursula on turn 2. This is a 2-cost inkable, 1/4 Singer 4. On turn 3, you would ink. you would sing a Kudet Amuti to pay 2 less for the next character you play this turn. And then you will shift your big Ursula onto your 2-cost Ursula on turn 3, turning songs off and putting a 4/7 body on the board on turn 3 is massive. Notably for Ursula, you don't necessarily turn songs off, you just turn off the ability to sing songs. Your opponent has to hard cast them. You also have to hard cast them, so be very well aware of that. But with her exert effect and cards like Dale coming in on the next turn and Elsa on the turn after, can really just make this get out of control far too quickly for your opponent to be able to handle. This is one of my favorite lines because Ursula herself is a very safe turn 2 play generally. A counter Singer 4 singing Along Came Zeus is probably the best way to deal with it. Or perhaps your opponent being on the play, so them going first and then playing a Sisu can deal with it. But otherwise, this is into a lot of these discard decks, a very powerful line. This is wonderful at shutting down a deck like Green Steel, forcing them to get up to that hard cast Bruno Ink, and you get a lot of damage done in the meanwhile. Overall, my thoughts on yellow-purple, very underrated as far as the purple decks go. It adds a very unique line and some really cool ways to build the deck. Even copying what's popular and good in core and just bringing it over will be strong enough to win some games. Dale is going to go down as one of the most powerful cards printed in Lorcana. Forgive me if that's another hot take for the day, but Dale is strong, and this deck uses Dale very well. Well, look who we have here. A fan favorite on this channel, one of my favorite decks, green-purple. As I've titled this deck, very nice and very evil. This is a green-purple discard deck. I do think you can play green-purple tempo in Infinity, but I think discard is probably the strongest way to go. It gives you fighting chances into some of these powerhouses of decks you're going to run across in Infinity. Fight fire with fire is probably my best way to discuss here. So this is our first discard deck we're going to talk about. And if you are coming straight from core, or you're a newer player who's never played in a world where Prince John exists, we need to discuss him. Prince John is one of the most powerful cards ever printed in Lorcana. 3-cost uninkable, 1/2, ward, 2-quester. Whenever your opponent discards one or more cards, you may draw a card for each card discarded. This makes discard a strategy. This makes it powerful. You may wonder, why does no one play cards like Sudden Chill and Core? Because you don't have a way to pay off. You don't have a payoff for this whole thing. Whereas Prince John is just that and carries it alone a lot of the time. But I can't not shout out our boy Diablo here. 3-cost uninkable. You're going to get to see a lot of 3-cost uninkables for these next few slides. 2/2, shift, discard an action card. So this is during a time period where they were testing out free shifts, in a sense, where you discard a card or do something else to play this character onto another character named Diablo. Notably green-purple, we have 10 other Diablos in this deck. We have the most Diablos of any color combination, I'm pretty certain. But being able to have a very consistent shift, Diablo says during each opponent's turn, whenever they draw a card, while this character you control is exerted, you may also draw a card. So this is a you can miss this. So if you're playing a Diablo deck, make sure you get your reps in paper and practice, but just always be drawing when your opponent's drawing. It is such a powerful effect. This card, while easy to remove, a 2/2, unwarded body. If your opponent does not have the means to deal with him in an efficient manner to get him off the board within 1 or 2 turns, he will carry the game away by himself. Outside of that, what this deck has for Infinity is, it looks like, well, of course, Friends on the Other Side makes a return, but we don't talk about Bruno. 5-cost inkable song. Return chosen character to their player's hand, then that player discards a card at random. So this triggers your Prince John and its effective removal. If your opponent has 0 cards in hand, this is basically remove a card and draw a card if you have a Prince John on board. You can establish your Elsa, 5th Spirit, to sing this in a powerful 1-2 punch. So why green-purple for the first discard deck? Why are we talking about that? Well, obviously I am a green-purple player. I really do enjoy it. But I think the green-purple discard is a very unique strategy where you're not trying to rob your opponent of every card. You have Sudden Chill, you have Chip and Bruno, and I guess Pull the Lever can double as a discard, but you don't have that much discard. You're very rarely going to take your opponent's entire hand away, but you're going to take away some of it, and you're going to make the game state more complex for them, and you're going to see so many cards. You back purple draw power with Emerald discard and the Prince John draw engine, and it makes for a very disgusting game plan. This deck doesn't have a huge amount of lore density. You're really just going to win on sheer attrition. You're just going to have so many bodies, and you're constantly whittling your opponent's cards down. Lenny, a set 12 card, says when you play this character, chosen opponent reveals their hand and discards an action card of your choice. And then once during your turn, notably the first time an action is played during your turn, you may ready this character. So Lenny can sing twice. You can sing 2 Sudden Chills, 2 Friends on the other side. You can have a lot of powerful combo plays with this card. I've included 3 copies of Merlin Crab to the deck because I think it's important to hedge against the Snowfort deck in a different way. And being yes, you have Prince John, yes, you have Diablo, but being able to fight the board against them is going to be very important. As well as another set 12 inclusion in Sabotage. Banish chosen item or location and all other items or locations with the same name. This card says, I don't care about your Snowfort. It says, I don't care about your 2 libraries in red-purple. This just gets red. It's a very versatile removal against something that people aren't used to having removal against. And it always could just be a discard option for your Diablo. Quick shout out to Dumbo and Genie here. Just being this powerful draw engine into the late game is super strong. You've never lived until you've turned a Diablo sideways with your Dumbo. There's just too much value in that play. So let's talk matchups. What are decks your favorite into? I would say red-blue is the one I have listed, but you're typically pretty favored into a lot of Sapphire decks. Blurple notwithstanding, Blurple is a complex matchup that's going to be a pretty big battle of skills, maybe slightly Blurple favored, but not huge either way. But Sapphire, in general, you can prey on them with your discard cards, and you just have far too many cards of your own for them to be able to deal with. A very complete strategy against that deck. I think you're favored against red-purple, which notably this is the only discard deck I'm going to say this about. But green-purple just has the fight against that deck to hold them down early, potentially catch them on a choke point with bad uninkables, and you're able to just overcome them with your sheer army of evasives coming at them every turn. Prince John decks, you find yourself pretty favored in the Prince John mirror. The discard mirrors can be very complex, but at the end of the day, green-purple has Amethyst cards to carry them through. You have cards like Dumbo or Genie. It doesn't mean you're always going to win every Prince John mirror. I just think it means you're favored going into most of them. Some unfavored matchups. I think Amber Steel is a very difficult one. We do have 2-cost Ursula Deceiver here, and you can just go for a Prince John line to discard them down before they're able to establish too wide of a board. But unfortunately, the Amber Steel removal, especially Let the Storm Rage On, is very effective against a lot of cards in this deck. Can make for some complex matchups and some tough times. I think yellow-purple gives this deck a pretty hard time overall. Maybe slightly harder than Blurple. It can definitely depend. They just have the means to rush out that early Ursula or whatever is going to be their win condition. And if you don't have the way to hard cast Bruno or, having the out to the Monstro, it can just be a tough uphill battle for sure there. Really though, green-purple has a pretty solid spread. largely because Tramp. What about me? For once, we don't have Tramp mentioned in unfavored. I don't think green-yellow is that favored into green-purple, if favored at all. I think Prince John plus Diablo give you some excellent ways to fight into that deck. The most complex part is just keeping their lore limited, keeping their options limited. We do have space in Emerald for a few cards that would be very powerful here. The Lyle Tiberius Rorks, the 2-cost and the 3-cost, I think are fantastic for lore drain or stopping your opponent from gaining lore. We also have answers to Chernabog, but it's obviously not on the favored side of things either, because despite us having these advantages into the deck, perhaps even discarding the Tramp before they're able to play it, sometimes 2 Daisy Ducks and a Snow Fort is just enough to take us out, and we just aren't able to catch up in time. We are definitely a deck that a early Mulan can capitalize on if they are playing that card. You may notice the lack of Madame Mim Fox in this deck, and I think a lot of that is just because 4 strength doesn't always get it done anymore, especially when you're looking at these Snow Forts, when you're looking at these Dales, where that 3 willpower can come back and just add up so quickly. Madame Mim Fox doesn't necessarily always guarantee a 2-for-1 anymore, and having to bounce a character off the board can sometimes just be game ending. Against these strategies, we are trying to quest every turn. We're trying to only remove what we need and consider it a race between the 2 decks. And I think I've chosen to exclude Fox because I don't think she's really committing a lot to that narrative there. Still, it can be a close matchup against Snow Forts for sure. I would definitely not say Snow Forts is unfair, or not Snow Forts. It can definitely be a tough matchup into Dogs for sure. I would definitely say Dogs are not unfavored, but we are not that unfavored either. So, as we're in the Diablo block of decks here, you're going to see a very similar mulligan guide. You're going to look for Diablo. You want a 1-cost Diablo, you want the 3-cost Diablo, and you want an action. This is the most important thing for Diablo decks. The earlier you get this card into play, the more value you can get out of it. And then if you have your way to Diablo, and sometimes if you don't, especially if you know the matchup and you know she can find success, I think keeping Ursula Deceiver is very powerful. Being able to limit Steel Song from removing your Diablo, just protecting Diablo, or just limiting their options for future turns by taking out their Akud is huge. So look for Diablo, sometimes keep Ursula. Yeah. Pretty simple mulligan for a fairly complex deck. Overall, my thoughts on green-purple is it's a very powerful deck. It may lack a little bit of the unfairness that you will see from a deck like Dogs, but it is definitely hard to chase that. Not everything is going to have a matchup spread that looks like the Dog deck, and I think green-purple has a very solid one if you want to get into that matchup roulette discussion. Well, another lemon lime deck. Could you imagine that? This is the 3rd one we've discussed. This one's way different than the other 2, and I felt like it needed its own time to discuss. This is one of the first decks that we're going to talk about that has not seen a lot of success in the post-rotation Infinity world. But it holds a specific niche of being a discard deck that is very strong into aggro decks. The line of Kita. When you play this character, all characters get -3 strength until the start of your next turn. And Under the Sea in the same turn to just board wipe your opponent is huge and very hard for most Dogs decks to come back from. More than that, you don't even fill their discard up for Chernabog discounts. So there's a lot of times they have to get there off of Tramp or discards. This deck discards the hardest out of every deck in the meta. Prince John followed up by a You Have Forgotten Me, 4-cost inkable. Each opponent chooses and discards 2 cards. So this is one of the biggest value plays in the game. Your opponent discards 2, you get to draw 2. It is massive here. You can make a flurry of discard happen with Sudden Chill or Bare Necessities just to hit each after the other. You see an inclusion of 2 Dales in this. There's not a lot that Dale makes a huge difference in. Kita, Tramp, Muses are going to be the biggest ones, but most importantly for Dale in this deck is he allows you to have board control after playing a Kita. So if you just curve out a Dale into a Kita, you're going to zero everything's strength out, but you're attacking with your willpower. And in every case of this deck, it's going to be as much damage, if not more, to attack with your willpower instead of your strength. So just a cute little 1-2 punch. I didn't feel like Dale needed too many copies. Muses. Muses are going to be a cornerstone of quite a few strategies we're about to talk about. This one is for certain one of them. Whenever you play a song, you may return chosen character with 2 strength or less to that player's hand. This is huge for keeping down aggro archetypes. It has a little bit of synergies with Max Goof here. Max Goof is a 3-cost 2/2. When you play this character, you may pay 1 to return a song from your discard back to your hand. So you can loop and add back discard cards. You can add back whatever you want song-wise, well, besides Bruno and Under the Sea, of course, just to keep your opponent down and out and have this little infinite draw engine. Muses also has some synergy with Della's Moon Lullaby. Chosen opposing character gets -2 strength until the start of your next turn and draw a card. Very simple, just kind of a replacement for Painting the Roses Red if you've seen that. I have seen some hybrid builds running both, but this is the first deck we're going to see Ariel Spectacular Singer into. 3-cost Inkable, 2/3, Singer 5, very relevant. And when you play this character, look at the top 4 cards of your deck. You may reveal a song, put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. This deck has 10, 12, 16, 19 songs. You're mathematically very likely to always hit a song with Ariel. Muses can also bounce your own Ariel to forge these huge lines of constantly adding value. Most of the songs make a lot of sense for what you're expecting out of this deck, but I do want to shout out World's Greatest Criminal Mind. This is a huge inclusion for Amber to be able to remove a opposing Ruby Scrooge McDuck before it gets too out of hand, because that's a way that your red-purple opponent can draw cards without drawing cards, and being able to take it out before they're able to get it too far boosted can punish them, or at least make them think twice about boosting it twice and leaving it on the board, because a lot of times that Scrooge can just put your deck out of the game. But if you have World's Greatest, get him out of there. Throw all those cards in the discard. One of my biggest reasons for discussing this deck is I really like what it's favored into. It's favored into nearly every Sapphire matchup, but I think Blurple is the one that's going to give it the most problems. All the other Sapphire decks that do not have Amethyst card draw behind them can get absolutely stormed by the flurry of discard coming from this. So you're really strong into slow decks that try to get up, try to build up, and you're also very strong into aggro because you have these under the sea lines that if your opponent does not have the check for, you just win. And sometimes you have unavoidable ways that they can't even play around. You can add the under the sea off Ariel. You can add the under the sea off Tramp 7-cost. By the way, Tramp 7-cost in a deck that is not a wide zoo deck because he's just that powerful. And he's a 7-cost singer. And he's a 6/6 under Dale. Could this card be a little bit stronger? Oh yeah, you can bounce him with your own muses. Wow. You get to search for the perfect card multiple times. Especially if you have a wide enough board, you can play this card for free. A lot. It is such a strong card in this deck. Unfavored matchups, I think a shout out to Merlin Rabbit decks, but this kind of holds a placeholder to most Amethyst. It can be very difficult. There's a silver bullet to this deck in the format in the form of Pete Games Referee. This is in core, but has not seen a lot of success in post-rotation. 3-cost Inkable, 3/3, 1-quester. When you play this character, opponents can't play actions until the start of your next turn. This is a huge shutdown to this deck because you really need actions to do about everything. Dale Kita gives you a little bit of some counterplay, but you don't have a whole lot going for you there. On the same note, I think this does decently well into the other Prince John decks, but Green Steel can be a difficult uphill battle to climb, especially because of cards like Pete or them looping Keep the Ancient Ways in front of you. your mulligan guide, as we discussed previously with green purple, and as we will discuss with pretty much any other Diablo deck we're going to talk about today. Hey, you're looking for Diablo. I do know some Lemon Lime gamers, some of the more advanced Lemon Lime gamers. Y'all know who you are out there. I don't have to call you out, but we'll say I'm wrong to hard search for Diablo. And I probably agree with that. But this is not for being the most advanced Lemon Lime player. This is how to be the best at the deck in a short amount of time. And I think always looking for the most powerful opener is going to be your best bet. And I think you just look for Diablo every game. You don't always know about the other cards you need in your hand. I think the one card I would generally lean towards keeping, depending, it would be Prince John, but I think Diablo is going to be priority number one. Ursula Deceiver, again, protects your Diablo, gets the discard engine rolling, is just a strong card into a lot of Infinity matchups. Overall, my thoughts on Lemon Lime discard is it's very unique. It's a very complex deck to play, and there's a lot of times you could end up in a bad way with it, but I do think it could be powerful enough to make a splash on your Infinity tournaments coming up, especially the DLCs. Keep your eyes open for this deck. Here we have one of my favorite decks in the game. I know, y'all, I can feel the judgmental looks hitting me right now. It's another Diablo deck. It's another Prince John deck. We got discard. We got all the things here. It's a very hateful deck, but it's also a lot of fun to play. I had mentioned briefly on the interaction between Muses and Max Goof, where Muses can bounce your own Max Goof back to your hand to forge some really powerful plays. Well, in Lemon Lime, a lot of times you need your Muses to bounce your opponent's cards. You lack a lot of hard removal outside of Under the Sea, and you need to generally be keeping them off the board and keeping discard flowing. This deck, your Max Goof is going to add back a card that kills a card. Let the Storm Rage on, Strength of a Raging Fire, even just Sudden Chill. I had previously mentioned Keep the Ancient Ways, but you can forge a loop. Keep the Ancient Ways, let's just talk about it. 2-cost Inkable. Opponents can't play actions or items until the start of your next turn. So if you are playing into a high off the ground item deck or Sapphire deck and they don't have a way to stop your loop, this could just be game over for them if they lack character removal. Just such a strong combination to just lock your opponent out of the game with. But more than that, just being able to have this toolbox of songs here at your disposal. I have one copy of Has Set My Heart. Clarabelle belting out a tune on that one. But it just says Banish Chosen Item. But with Max Goof and Muses, this can destroy an entire Snow Fort field. I think there's a world you could go up on this card, especially after this past weekend. But it is really bad in the matchups that it doesn't get involved in. You can always discard it for Diablo. You can always ink it. Worth a mention. Speaking of Diablo, we do have 7 copies of a shift target in this deck. You see the 2-cost inkable Steel Diablo from the latest set. This card says, while you have a villain character in play, this character gets +2 strength, +1 lore, so it becomes a Mr. Smee. We play a lot of villains. We see 2 different kinds of Ursulas, we see Prince John, Pete, but notably Diablo himself is not a villain. Still, and then while this character is exerted, your villain characters cannot be challenged, so it's a pseudo bodyguard for cards like Ursula Deceiver of All. Even curving out this Diablo into Ursula, double seeing, take out parts of your opponent's board, and protect your Ursula on the clapback is so strong. As far as songs go in the terms of like the toolbox and whatnot, there's also I'm Still Here, which might be new to a lot of people. Chosen character gains resist +2 until the start of your next turn, draw a card. This basically says, my Diablo is really hard to kill unless you're playing Ruby, and I get to draw a card. Even against a deck like Steel Song, oftentimes this allows you to open Diablo without Ursula and keep yourself alive from a Let the Storm Rage On, which by the way is in this deck. 3-cost uninkable. Deal 2 damage to chosen character, draw a card. A lot of ways this is a draw engine with Ursula Deceiver of All. When this character sings a song, you may play that song again from your discard for free. Free is good. Free is what? Free is good. and then you put it on the bottom of your deck. So a little bit of anti-synergy with Max Goof, but often enough, the burst of singing a song twice in that moment is well worth the losing it afterwards. Super strong card. Notably, you don't have to bottom deck cards. You can just sing with her normally. Sometimes you want to do that whenever you're setting up a Keep the Ancient Ways loop. Such a strong card for this deck. You notice my iteration of Green Steel plays no Morph Beast line. There's no like heavy late game. There's no Pete here, because I feel like you really just want to treat this like a toolbox deck where you're going to accumulate a huge resource advantage over your opponent, and you're going to quest out and put them out of the game. From this past weekend, we saw a really cool interaction that I just wanted to shout out very quickly in Green Steel. It was Braden who played this at the Ink Invitational, where he would go Headless Horseman, which is a 4-cost inkable 4/4 bodyguard, also a villain for Diablo, into Shift Horseman, which is an 8-cost Shift 5 that says both players draw 3 cards and discard 3 cards at random and deal 2 damage to a chosen character for each action discarded. This is a way to proc your Prince John with a guarantee from your opponent. Absolutely huge. It's nice to have removal that's not character based, and it gives the deck a little bit more late game. But since I had not practiced with that archetype an awful lot, I chose to leave him off and just talk about the list that I knew. Let's talk matchups, because they are pretty good for this deck. Green Steel is the first deck. I will openly say you have a slight favor into playing against the dog decks. And Lemon Lime discard, to be fair. But you have the steel removal to keep them off the board. You have the songs to keep bouncing their characters with muses, to keep them from just chunking you hard with Tramp. You have the discard to remove that Tramp before he is even able to hit the board. Yes, they will overwhelm you at times. Yes, you will not find songs when you need them the most. Your deck will betray you at times. But I think overall, you have a slight edge into dogs, and I think that's worth mentioning. Ruby Sapphire, it feels almost free for this deck. You can lock them out of their late game with bouncing, Keep the Ancient Ways turn after turn. If they're not on Sisu or Leviathan, perhaps, it can be a really complex matchup for your opponent to navigate, and against a lot of less confident Ruby Sapphire players, you can just put them out with it. Green Blue, the item deck, the Tinkerer construct deck. I think this deck has a hard time playing into Green Steel, mostly because of the lock, but also you can just discard them down in some vulnerable points before they get to that part with their workshop, or you can just banish their workshop if you have your song able to take them out. You can answer their Oswald early. It makes the matchup very complex to them. Unfavored, unsurprisingly, I'm going to put 2 purple decks on here. I think Blurple is very hard to win. They are going to play an early Demona on you, and they also have the draw power to out-sustain your discard. Very tough to get over that, no matter what you're playing, Horseman or not, into this deck. And then Ruby Amethyst can be very complex. Yes, you can often discard them down, but it is very hard to answer their Scrooge McDuck before he becomes a problem, and you cannot Bruno that card. You have to just build a board and hit it before they're able to bounce it, and that leaves you weak to cards like Be Prepared. You have to hold your Ursula at proper times. I think this could be a large skill check. I have high skill variance for Green Steel. It's one of the most complex decks in the game, which is one of my favorite reasons to play it. But I also think Red Purple can just be considered a bad matchup. I think the stats back that up as well. Wow! The Mulligan Guide section was so easy for these last few decks. I just had to copy and paste. Yeah, you're looking for Diablo about every game. There can be some matchups you'd want to keep, like the other Diablo. If you're on the draw, you may want to keep a White Rabbit. Prince John in some matchups, keeping is very smart. But largely, most hands, I'm just shipping for Diablo and just trying to do one of the most powerful things in the game. Mathematically, you could argue, like, It's worth keeping certain cards, especially a card like Ursula Deceiver we see here once again. If you know the matchup, there's a lot of times I find myself keeping her. But really, you just want to do one of the most powerful things in the game, and the Diablo opener is that. I think Green Steel is well positioned. It is a very complex deck, and you have a lot of ways to build it. You have a lot of approaches to change up how each matchup's going to go depending on what you think is going to be popular. All this to say, I believe in this deck a lot. This is one of my favorite options looking at DLC Indy coming up, and just a really good deck. Ah, my eyes. Mo, what is this mess? What did you put in front of us right now? Alright. This deck is not some huge secret. This has been talked about since some of these cards were revealed. I do think it's worth mentioning. So this is going to be the second of 3 decks that really don't have a lot backing themselves up right now in terms of success, but I do think this deck's worth mentioning and discussing briefly. Don't promise. Will not take a lot of time here. So what are you looking at? What is this deck trying to do? This is a combo deck. This is a discard deck that is also a combo deck because it has a OTK combo. How do you do that? Well, you need a few things. You need a dry Meg on the board. Megara, 5-cost inkable, 4/4, 2-quester, warded. Very important. That ward is a big keyword in a lot of these decks. Whenever you play a character named Hercules, you may ready this character. Well, this makes a fantastic combination with the brand new Hercules, one of my favorite cards ever released at this point. I adore this card. 2-cost uninkable, 2/1. When you play this character, you may discard your hand. Oof. If you do, return a card from your discard to your hand. So you need a dry Meg, you need Hercules on the board, you need a Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo, either in hand or in your discard, and then you need a Maui Shark, either on the board or in your hand with the ability to play him. There's a lot of ways to start this combo, but basically you will go Meg, sing Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo, bounce one of your other characters, play Hercules, gain a lore from Maui Shark, Hercules adds back the Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo, and then the Meg readies because she sees Hercules played, and then you repeat this 20 times for lethal. This deck has a very cool win condition in that sense, but a very cool win condition does not necessarily make a deck good. If you're familiar with me, you know I'm a big fan of this color combination, and I believe a lot in the power of certain Ruby cards and certain Emerald cards. So I think ideally, when you're approaching this deck, you keep the combo in mind, but you really do just want to play good cards, and that's what I'm attempting to do here to a certain extent, where I'm just looking to discard my opponent, put them on low resources, establish a Maui Shark, able to stop them from questing, or just these powerful Ruby characters, and work my way up to my win condition, just establishing the pieces of my combo. Or in a lot of matchups, you can just float Meg and Hercules and quest with her 4 or 5 times in a turn, and in the game, just with little Meg bursts. You don't necessarily have to do the lethal combo to win with this deck. It can find a lot of really cool ways. But I said I wasn't going to take a ton of time talking about this. I just wanted to bring it up because I do think while it's a vulnerable strategy, it is powerful. Quick shout out to 2 copies of Education or Elimination in this deck. I was brainstorming ways to avoid my opponent's Demona, and this is a card that makes your Meg evasive, so she can avoid a lot of boards that can force her sideways and take her with Demona. But then it also has the benefit of adding a lore to her, which forms another way to forge your OTK. You can find a way to play this card and quest with Meg. I believe it's 5 times in a turn. So some way, shape, or form, you can stack lore on Meg with this card and Muses bouncing your Hercules to replay. One of the most common plays in this deck will be Muses on 4, Meg on 5. On 6, you're running out of cards because you haven't drawn yet. You ink. You sing a song. So let's say Sudden Chill, for example. You'll sing Sudden Chill with Meg. And then you go Hercules, add back Sudden Chill, ready Meg. Sing Sudden Chill. Bounce Hercules with your muses, play him again, add back Sudden Chill, and you basically get to repeat a song 4 times on turn 6, which is powerful in its own right. Very cool deck, very cool for a combo deck. Let's just talk about why you'd want to play it. I think it's favored into the dog deck. Oh, I could hear it right now, the collective groans from my audience. I think this deck beats the dog deck. And not always. It can definitely brick, it can definitely have some hard matchups, but you have some board states that just prevent them from winning. You can remove their characters, you have all the removal options in the world. You can drain their lore with that 2-cost Lyle Tiberius Rourke. You have muses to keep them off from lethal pushing to you, while still having the ability to discard your opponent down. And then in some situations, if they weren't able to threaten you effectively enough, you can just curve out the OTK combo and win the game on turn 6. I have red-blue here, but that's kind of most Sapphire outside of Blurple once again. I think this takes an advantage of slow decks because you can generally curve out your combo before B-Prep, you can discard to prevent the B-Prep. They just give you a lot of time to form a game plan is what I'll say. This deck's important because it demands an answer. A warded character on board and a card in hand aren't always the easiest things for a lot of decks to answer, and I think Meg being able to just threaten lethal from the turn after she's played is really scary for a ward card. You just never know if they've got it. It's kind of like Monstro combo, but in a different, like, scarier way. Unfavored, unsurprisingly, for a discard deck, once again, 2 purple decks. Blurple's unfavored because Blurple is the Demona deck of the format, and Demona kills your Meg, makes it very hard to win the game. And then red-purple's also here because they can sustain with Merlin Rabbit if they're not playing Demona. They can sustain with Merlin Rabbit and still threaten Be Prepared if you don't have an Ursula handy to remove it. But there's a lot of red-purple decks that are still just playing Demona, like I am, and that makes this matchup very complex to win, as well as Scrooge McDuck just being a major pain in the neck to deal with. So, demands an answer, but is a very vulnerable deck. Your mulligan's going to be real simple. You're looking for basically 2 cards. You would like to see a 2-cost character, any 2-cost character. Scrooge is obviously the best of them, but you do have to be a little wary of uninkables in this deck. And then you want to see Prince John in every game. Prince John and Hercules are the only advantage engines to get you to the late game in this deck. And a lot of times you're going to run out of cards, but you kind of want to. You want to float Hercules. If you're into a discard matchup, you want to insulate your Hercules to require them to have more discard options, and then just use him to add back either inkables to float your way to a board out of nowhere, or to be able to add back a card you need. Perhaps you're up against green steel and they're making your life hard. Well, you can discard a malicious, mean, and scary early, and then look to play it 4 times on turn 6 and wipe their board. Can do some crazy things. I don't have it on here, but I do think green steel is a very complex matchup. I do think it's a very skillful matchup, but I think it's generally a little bit green steel favored for sure. Cards like Pete shut down this deck to a certain extent and force you to have to play in a different way. And just being able to discard you back and it potentially hits your Hercules, and then a lot of times it just pushes it to game over. Overall, I like the deck. I don't know who's going to be the crazy mad lad to figure it out and make it work for them, but I support it and I want to see it happen. Someone win a DLC with this deck. Oop. Quick interlude. Thumbnail time. I really want to shout out this Buzz here. A quick little 2-card combination here. So you have the 7-cost uninkable Buzz, but before that we'll discuss the 3-cost inkable Buzz. 4/2 says whenever you pay 2 or less to play a non-character, draw a card, then choose and discard a card. And then the secondary effect, whenever you pay 2 or less to play a character, deal 1 damage to opposing damage character. This is a combination that occurred to me pretty early on, but if you have this Buzz next to your Meg Hercules loop, you don't necessarily have to it still provides you value. You get to search your deck for any card in particular. Enter 7-cost Buzz. Uninkable, Shift 5, 7/5, 2-quester. When you play this character, you may return an action card with a cost of 7 or less from your discard to your hand, and then whenever you play an action, chosen character gets +1 lore this turn. Notably, Meg does not say she can't quest that turn. So, you can use Buzz to stack lore onto Meg and quest for 20 in one turn. And you can use Buzz 3 to mill through your deck and find Buzz 7 to establish lethal. How do you do that? Well, Buzz either survives a turn, you need 5 ink for the shift, so Buzz either needs to survive the turn. He can do that in some matchups, not all. Next to the Dry Meg Hercules combo, and then you keep looping Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo with Meg and Hercules until you mill your Buzz Lightyear. Then with Herc, you'll add back Buzz, you will shift Buzz for 5, and Buzz will add back the Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo, and then you continue your loop until you get 20 lore on Meg and are able just to quest for lethal. This is very cool. It's really crazy to have a searchable OTK in Lorcana. I wanted to shout it out because I included him in the thumbnail, but overall, unfortunately, I think this is a little bit too much of a pipe dream. F4-2 is very easy to remove in Infinity, and this kind of breaks my rule of Christmas where I say just play good cards. Like Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo, don't get me wrong, is a good card in this deck. You can do some terrifying things with that card, especially with the Meg Hercules. And these two cards don't do a whole lot as much as that. So, really cool. Wanted to shout them out, but overall, I don't know about it. So, before we move on, I want to discuss the meta just a little bit. Do we think dogs or purple are a gatekeeper? Or do we think we have a triangle format where Prince John's able to beat dogs, that beats purple, that beats Prince John? With Sapphire decks popping in and chiming in as they can. I definitely don't think it's a triangle format. I do think the success of dogs is currently being bolstered by the popularity of Steel Song and Red Purple, because those matchups, for me, feel very dog favored. And I don't think there's any world that Steel Song and Red Purple will not be some of the most popular decks in an Infinity tournament. Looking at pre-rotation, these were some of the most popular decks in Lorcana's history. People miss playing these decks. People love the ability to bounce a rabbit again, or sing Let the Storm Rage On with a Cinderella again. And overall, I think dog success is going to continue happening because people want to play the decks they want to play. So in a way, it is a little bit gatekeeping in the sense that the rabbit decks beat anything that tries to contend with the big dog, and it just kind of allows the big dogs to continue finding success. Who knows what would happen if we didn't have dogs in the format? Like, who knows what would happen if people just suddenly stop playing Red Purple? Maybe we live in a discard world, and that would be kind of terrible for game design in a lot of ways. I'm a fan of discard as an archetype, but it's not generally a fun deck to play against, and that's important. So it can be pretty complex. I think dogs' win rates kind of speak for themselves. You look at some of the event from this past weekend, dogs took 3 of the top 4 spots and ended up in a mirror match finals. Just very strong deck moving forward, and it's very hard to find the correct counters to everything in the meta, I will say. So not quite a triangle, not quite a square with Sapphire in there somewhere, just more of like a multi-headed beast with dogs being the largest and scariest one. Ruby Sapphire. Man, this deck and I go back a long ways. I made my Lorcana career by beating this deck. And eventually, I learned how to play it and got so confident with it that I was able to play it at the World Championship last year. I think Ruby Sapphire is a lot of people's favorite control deck. It plays kind of like nothing we've had in the post-rotation world. And you get to utilize one of the most fun cards in the game, being Maui Shark. Maui Shark is a fun card to play, a very rewarding card whenever it pops off. So you're essentially trying to ramp up to a shark to freeze your opponent, or perhaps just to be prepared to fully wipe the board. And then after that, you want to establish big character after big character and just hold value. This deck's called 1 to the 2 to the 4 to the 6 because it's a 2-4-6 deck where you really want to go ramp on 2, ramp again on turn 3. So you're going to go from a 2-drop to a 4-drop, and then you're going to ramp again and hit a 6-drop and be able to play either a Maui Shark or a Tamatoa, or in some cases, an Olaf, a brand new addition to this deck. If you're looking at this, you're thinking, Mo, are you crazy? This card is very strong and made a good showing over the weekend. Olaf, 9-cost inkable, 4/4, 2-quester. For each action card in your discard, you pay 1 less to play this character. When you play this character, each opponent loses 2 lore. So you drain your opponent from the aggro deck, but this gives you another way to pseudo ramp and to be prepared. So you can go develop your brain on turn 1, sail, develop again on turn 2. That's 3 actions, so he's 6 cost to play at that point. If you play 1 more action on turn 4, you get the ability to play him on turn 5, and that lets you skip ahead a turn to be prepared sooner, because Olaf is a 9-cost character when he hits the board. He can sing Be Prepared and allow you to establish a character of your choice afterwards, or just a McDuck manner. A very powerful 1-2 punch of cards. A notable exclusion from this deck is Sisu. I do think Sisu is very powerful, but Snowfort really puts a damper on that power. When one of the most popular aggro decks in the format no longer gets swept by Sisu, it's definitely a problem when you're running such a high cost uninkable. I think Leviathan, as we'll discuss in a moment, spoilers, could be a great way to approach from there, but I kind of don't necessarily think the deck needs it right now. Ruby Sapphire can reward expertise, and this is a lot of people's favorite deck in the game. It is very fun and does what it does very well. Controls the board and has a huge burst lore turn in the late game with Maui Shark and Pirate's Life to stop your aggro opponent from ending the game ever. You saw a respect from Kurt Spice, the winner of the Ink Invitational, with Horseman Strikes in the deck to remove this Maui Shark to stop them from setting up this Maui Shark plus Pirate's Life endgame against them. This deck can put out lore very quickly. It also has McDuck Manor. A huge play is Be Prepared to wipe the board, followed up by 2 McDuck Manors on their 8 ink turn. That is 18 willpower of location health to chew through. And then if they have another Be Prepared, they're just going to chip so much lore each and every turn. It just gets out of control really quickly, especially with how much lore modulation this deck has between Pirate's Life and Olaf. Very strong way to run the deck, perhaps the strongest way to run Ruby Sapphire, but my favorite one is going to be Ruby Sapphire items. This deck combines very potent removal through your Ruby cards with the item engine of Lucky Dime plus Tamatoa finding your endgame. Maurice's Workshop, this is the first of many times we'll discuss this card. It says when you play another item, you may pay 1 to draw a card. Very simple, but effective. I just spent time talking about Sisu, Empowered Sibling, and how I didn't think she was great in the typical Ruby Sapphire deck anymore. Well, this deck, you have access to Sapphire Coil. During your turn, whenever a card is put into your inkwell, you may give chosen character -2 strength this turn. So if you're up against a Snowfort board, you can start -2 strength. You can use a Fishbone Quill and ink again. You can ramp. You can just ink for turn. You have tons of ways to trigger this card multiple times and have a huge Sisu board wipe. Most importantly, this deck has the powerful line of Sisu into Shift Sisu to curtail aggro. And then the late game of this deck feels so inevitable and so powerful that you can even rival Amethyst in card draw with Workshop, as well as the inevitability of getting to the point where you can play a Lucky Dime to the board, or even a Tamatoa and a Lucky Dime in the same turn, and tap it for lethal. That's 17 ink, by the way. I remember that. That is one of the most important things to learn with this deck. So this deck, instead of like playing characters, you're counting your items and you're just figuring out what you need to push lethal out. And some days it's just a dime on a Sisu and enough times, and you just end the game before your opponent even realizes it. Very strong deck. Not the most popular way to run this strategy, but one that I really wanted to shout out. Also, very notably, one of the more complex decks to play, especially at an appropriate pace. If you want to work on this deck, start playing paper now, because it is very different, and learning all these triggers and doing them in a fast enough pace will be challenging. And then I have another Ed deck for you. I just want to shout out, I don't know how serious he was on this, but I have tested it, and it is surprisingly effective in a lot of ways. Here we have Leviathan, the new Sisu in a weird way. 10 cost uninkable, 10/10, 3-quester. Huge investment to play this card. When you play this character, if 2 or more cards were put into your discard this turn, you may banish any number of chosen opposing characters with 10 strength or less. How do you get to this card? The new Kita Legendary. Shift 6. When you play this character, each player puts up to 5 cards from their discard into their inkwell face down and exerted. And then she also has an effect where you can pay 7, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, one of them goes to your hand. That secondary effect can come into play after you've ramped enough times with the first effect, but really it's just to get out Leviathan. Now, once you have Leviathan, how do you realize the effect? You can either play some of your really small actions here to push it out faster, or you can have 2 popsicles on your side of the board and crack them both, and then use your Leviathan. Really cool deck. Don't want to spend too much time talking on it, but Leviathan is already making a splash on Infinity play, and learning how to play this card and play around it could be very valuable for your run coming up at any Infinity tournament you're going to. So red-blue in general, what matchups are we favored into? I think we do well into Blurple. I think we can just kind of control them and their tempo-based strategy, and if we're playing items, we can often overwhelm them fast enough that we can just tap our dime and take them out. The removal just feels really good into this matchup. I think Amber Steel it's kind of a tale as old as time as this deck beating Amber Steel. Amber Steel really needs to go under, because this deck's all about taking out your opponent's board, and if Amber Steel doesn't have singers, their deck feels very mediocre. Ruby Sapphire, whichever variant you're playing, can win most matchups. It's a very skill check style deck, and a lot of people really enjoy that. You have very few outright terrible matchups to the point that they feel unwinnable. Even our unfavored matchups that we'll discuss here, I think red-purple is unfavored because they can often just out-inevitable you, and they can push lore pretty quickly with Goat. Protecting their Goat is huge in this matchup, and playing their board wipes around yours and everyone just playing as smart as can be is really strong. I think if you're the Ruby Sapphire player, if you want to win this matchup, you're really racing to get to 17 ink and go Tamatoa tap dime for lethal. And you don't want to leave yourself in an exploitable way, but red-purple has a much simpler win condition of just playing Goat, bouncing him, chipping lore, and then establishing down a few locations backed up by a Be Prepared in hand can just get too overwhelming too quickly. And Prince John discard can be tough for Ruby Sapphire. You play a ton of songs, a ton of actions, or not a ton of songs, but very impactful songs. And just getting your hand ripped apart by Prince John before you're able to scale can make some messy matchups. A lot of discard matchups get into a point where you're just top decking to ink, and you hope to hit that Sisu to take the board back, or you hope to hit that Be Prepared to take the board back, and a lot of times discard just comes out on top here. Finally, well, where's Tramp at in this? He's not in favored or unfavored. What's happening? Ruby Sapphire is naturally disposed to be pretty good against a deck that plays a lot of low strength characters. Ruby removal feasts on that. But that being said, there's a lot of times that the Tramp deck can just go too fast too quickly. And just Ruby Sapphire can't catch up. They can hit you with an Ursula on your Be Prepared before you're able to retake the board. And then Snowfort adds a lot of complications for removing characters. You just don't have the way to always take down their entire board. And even if you get the board wipe, if they've already chipped enough lore away from you, they could be one Go-Go or one Chernabog away from victory to make this matchup complex. I would not say it's heavily favored one side or the other, but I would say probably slightly dog-favored. Mulligans here are going to be pretty simple. Generally looking for a Popsicle to establish your advantage engine. If you're playing Bell, you could also be looking for Popsicle Bell. Whatever you want to do, but finding that Popsicle early is imperative. Ramp, though, is going to be the most important thing you do here, especially if you're not on a version playing Fishbone Quill. You really want to go a 2-drop on 2 every game, so there's a lot of times I'm mulliganing 7 cards to find this. The only card I would ever consider keeping is a Popsicle, because it's important for your late game engine. Notably, there are some matchups, though, Aggro being the most predominant one, that you will mulligan all 7, including Popsicle, back to find your ramp. It's that important. And then a 4-drop to play on turn 3. Either a Scrooge McDuck / Grandma Tala, depending on the version you're playing. Cinderella, if you're doing the 2-4-6 stuff. Just going straight into what Sapphire decks do powerful, which is playing a 4 on 3. Here is a anti-aggro line for the item deck, or perhaps any deck playing Sisu in general, but you go ramp on 2, turn 3, or you go ramp on 2. On turn 3, you can also ramp because you have 3 ink, so say if you have 2 Sail the Azurite Seas, you could ramp again, play Sisu, take out one of your opponent's characters. So if you're on 3 and you ramp again, you'll go to 5, and the next turn you can just ink and go Sisu to obliterate the board. You can also do this with a little bit of a wait in between, where you can go Sisu on turn 3, ramp again on turn 4 with like a Fishbone Quill or perhaps a Sail or another Tipo, and then on turn 5 Sisu. Just getting her out a little bit earlier helps out a lot. I think Ruby Sapphire is in a pretty solid spot. It can be tough. I think the popularity of dogs and Ruby Amethyst can make for a challenging field. But if this is the deck that you are choosing to take and you feel confident piloting it, that is one of the most important things you can have going into one of these tournaments. Solid choice for sure. Bleen's the name and items are my game. So this is definitely a deck that you need to be aware of moving forward. This is a control deck. It's very similar to Ruby Sapphire items in a lot of ways, but very different in others. This is a huge Oswald deck. I believe there's something close to 30 items in this build, so your Oswald's hitting more often than not. You're playing to keep your opponent off the board with cards like Bell, Scrooge, Kit Cloud Kicker with the combination of Kit plus Sapphire Coil to bounce different cards to your opponent's hand, and eventually assemble an Under the Sea to minus your opponent's board and have a one-sided board wipe with that Under the Sea. All this just to stall and delay as you play item after item, because your end game is always going to be Tamatoa Dime with this deck. You see only 2 copies of Tamatoa 8-drop in this deck, thanks to the Forbidden Mountain for this list, but you get up to the point where you get all these items in play and you tap Dime for Tamatoa and just hit them for 20 in a turn. This is the most consistent deck in the game at doing that. Definitely is a very different play style and is a lot of fun if you're used to core, which is often playing characters every single turn. This can be a nice breath of fresh air for you. But this is a complex deck, and piloting it to the max skill is going to be challenging for sure. Matchups, you're typically favored into Sapphire. Other Sapphire matchups, you're just better late game than most. You will find your way to Tamatoa Dime faster than Red Blue will. You have answers for most things they play. It's very hard to take you out. One thing I did not mention here is Radigan's Marvelous Trap. banish this item, each opponent loses 2 lore. You can cycle that with Tamatoa 6-drop, or a Merlin's Carpet Bag finds its way into a lot of these builds to recycle items and just keep draining your opponent's lore. It's very hard to end the game against this deck if you're playing something like a Maui Shark deck. And then Red-Purple finds a lot of the similar struggles because they just don't have the lore density into the early game to threaten you, and you just get to slowly kind of solitaire the board up until the point you get to Tamatoa Dime and win. Some unfavored matchups. I think the dog deck, both Snowfort and Non, is often just a little bit too fast. If you're trying to assemble an Under the Sea, you got some quick lines to play it, but it can just be hard to get there. I think Purple Steel is kind of a rather miserable matchup because they're just going to chip away at you. They have ways to interact with your items, and it can just be very challenging to deal with the permanence of all of their burn cards. I have I Find My Platinum here. 4-cost Inkable Song simply says banish all items. Obviously, this is a big ow for the deck. If they resolve this, you can play around it. You have Tamatoas to add back from the discard, but it is very challenging to win after you get hit by a Find 'em Platinum from a good position. Maurice's Workshop plus Popsicle over here is pretty powerful. Just being able to draw cards to add an extra bonus to all of your items is very good. Once again, to shout out for the item decks is you need to play at a very quick pace. Mulligan Guide's pretty simple. You're really looking for Popsicle Bell to kind of curtail the aggro as best as you can. Oswald is what you want to do on 2 every game with this deck. You have other things you can play on 2 for sure, but Oswald is one of the things you're going to hard mulligan for. There's no Tipo, there's no Sail in this list. And then on turn 3, you'd either like to establish a workshop to start planning a big turn 4 draw, or get a Fishbone Quill in play and start ramping up while also hitting your Oswald triggers. Keep in mind you should be hitting roughly every other Oswald trigger with this deck, even more so if you're mathematically keeping quite a few characters in your opener. If you're keeping more characters than items, Oswald should be hitting a little bit more than every other. My thoughts on blue-green items is it's a very powerful deck. It is perhaps the most powerful late-game deck in the game. It is just has that impending doom effect where they're draining you lore and they're just steadily building their board of items that just pushes you out of the game while they're waiting to hit that 17 ink number to safely go Tamatoa Dime. Or if they're in a matchup where their Tamatoa or their Dime is safe, they could play either out early and speed up this process a little bit. Tamatoa Quest Dime is a powerful ender that speeds up the game a lot. Here is another interesting approach to items in general. We have, and this is caveat, this is another deck that we have not seen a lot of success since the banning of Hiram Flaversham. I think it is a very powerful archetype still. This is blue steel items. So we're doing a lot of the same things we were doing previously, but we have a lot of steel removal to help us out and some better items. Fortisphere has the same effect as Popsicle. You're basically playing 8 Popsicles in the deck, which gives you a ton of available draw. Along Came Zeus and Angel can often help slow down aggro just enough for you to retake the board on them. This deck is definitely interesting where it hits the item play style. It has some of the best things you can possibly hit with Oswald. A quick shout out to Darkwing's chair set I've included in this deck. When you play this item, you may put the top card of your deck into your Inkwell face down and exerted. So if you hit this off Oswald, you get to ink again and maybe hit another card off Oswald, which is really funny. And then the Might Solve a Mystery engine. Look at the top 4 cards of your deck. You may reveal up to 1 character card and up to 1 item card and put them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. Just some very, really cool, really powerful engine here. I think this deck has potential. I definitely don't know if it's quite as strong as the other item decks, so I'll warn you of that now. But it's definitely a lot of fun, and you have so many ways to just draw a million cards in this deck that it's just an absolute blast to play. So why play it? I think it is one of the few item decks that can feel favored into a deck like... I have green steel here. Statistically, it does pretty well into green steel, but I think that's largely because of cards I'm not playing with this build, so forgive me. I do think Grab Your Swords, Tinkerbell makes a huge difference into that matchup. But as long as you're not getting Keep the Ancient Ways looped, you can have a decent line into that deck. And even if they start trying to loop you, you play Pete of your own. So you can stop them from looping you for a turn and then just absolutely blow up with items and do some crazy damage to your opponent in the next turn. One thing to note about Keep the Ancient Ways is it just stops you from playing an item. You can still activate the effects of your on-field items, so you can use the Robot Queen's effect to banish and deal 2 damage. You can use Fishbone Quill to ink and continue ramping, or you can use Lucky Dime to gain lore. And you can always do something like play a Tamatoa and force them to have the Bruno to remove it, to put a lot of pressure onto that matchup. I think this is favored into Ruby Sapphire, kind of in a lot of ways that Green Blue is. This definitely just out late games a lot of decks. There's cards like Sheriff of Nottingham that I'm not playing that just add another late game dimension to this. You beat slow decks and you beat small aggro decks. So by small aggro, I mean stuff like yellow-purple or green-purple burn, perhaps even. I don't know if green-purple burn's going to feel that favored, but you can beat a lot of aggro decks just with the steel removal from this deck. I think your unfavored matchups are going to once again be dogs. They're just have too much willpower in their deck, and cards like Snowfort just make you question if Steel's even worth playing right now. It can be a very complex matchup for sure. I think Blurple can feel kind of bad because they can tempo out these huge bodies to the board, these huge warded characters that are effectively immune to your Steel removal, and just have just too much too quickly. Not as quickly as, like, it's just harder to take advantage of as opposed to a deck like Ruby Sapphire. And then once again, I find in my Platinum here with a big owl beside it. It can definitely be hard to come back from this card. But it is notable that Lucky Dime plus Tamatoa is inevitable. This deck is so committed to this endgame that it's playing 4 copies of Tamatoa and 2 copies of Lucky Dime, so you can try to establish multiple of these cards. You can play quite a few. You can just use Tamatoa for its tempo effect of adding an item back on play and on quest, but it will quickly end the game if this card lives a turn, which for on a 5/8 body is not impossible. Your mulligan guide's going to look a lot like Green Blue did, where you're looking for a Popsicle Bell to establish your early game. Turn 2, you really either want to go the Oswald route, or you want to play Tipo or a Sail to ramp up and play a 4-cost on turn 3. And then on turn 3, you either want to go for a Fishbone Quill if you went the Oswald route, perhaps even a Tipo or a Sail now. I always lean to play Oswald on 2 with this deck just to get it out safer. It's a 2/1 body. It effectively dies to every form of removal in the format. So the earlier you play Oswald, the safer he will be. So I would like to play Oswald first and then ramp afterwards, or just look to establish a 4-cost character to keep my opponent out. I wanted to shout out this deck because it is very uniquely placed and it's very consistent about doing the item game plan, which gives it a unique line into the field, but I don't know if I could recommend going into this deck without a lot of experience here. Well, same song, different story. Here we have Steel Song. This is one of the most famous archetypes in Lorcana, a huge fan favorite. I mentioned Red Purple being so popular. I feel like Steel Song chases it at every corner. This deck essentially is trying to play a singer every turn and then sing a song that removes one of your characters every turn. You get to play, remove, And there's a few different variations of this deck. I think Cinderella plus Akud is going to find their way into a lot of these older Steel Song lists. But the biggest difference maker here for Steel Song is going to be whether you're including the card A Whole New World or not. 5 cost uninkable. Each player discards their hand and draws 7. This card allows you to refresh your opponent's hand if they're getting too out crazy or if you feel like they have too many powerful cards in their hand. It also allows you to just empty out your hand and just have a constant refresher there that allows you just to spam characters turn after turn after turn. I think it's really unique for a Steel deck to also have a decent answer into Scrooge McDuck, which is World's Greatest Criminal Mind. Allows you to hit that Scrooge and take it out rather early. And you have some really powerful late game through cards like Dale or the Aerial cards. Aerial Sonic Warrior is one of the coolest cards in the game. Shift 4, 6 cost, 3/8, 2 quester. Very good stat line. When you play a song, you may pay 2 to deal 3 damage to chosen character. So if you look at this, there's a ton of songs in this deck. This deck absolutely bullies some decks that do not have a lot of powerful willpower behind them, and just gives them a very tough time. Even a card like Dale, flipping the script and turning your Ursulas into a 4/4, your Daisies into a 4/4, Rapunzel into a 5/5, Ariel into a monstrous 8/8 is absolutely huge, and a lot of times people are just unsuspecting of that. Cool new addition to a very established strategy. The second Steel Song list that we will discuss is going to be a Value Town style deck. This was popularized by Sky, probably pretty close to a year ago now, where the deck really just looks to play a lot of just good cards. No Whole New World in this deck, so no need to give both players 7 cards because you're just going to be drawing cards on your own. Be Our Guest is such an interesting inclusion to this version of the deck. Look at the top 4 cards. You may reveal a character card and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So you just get to basically just add cards, keep moving, keep flowing the value engine. The new Ariel, 4 cost inkable, 3/4. Once during your turn, whenever you play a song, if there's a card under this character, you get to draw a card. I also had that in the wheel list, but I do think it's less impactful there than it is here. And then Beast, Tragic Hero, Sad Boy Beast. 5 cost inkable, 3/5. At the start of your turn, if this character has no damage, draw a card. Otherwise, he gets +4 strength this turn. So if he just sits, the longer he sits there, the more cards he's going to generate. And you have a way to play this card on turn 3. You can establish a Singer on turn 1 or 2. Sing Akud on turn 3, and then use that reduction to play a Beast very early before most decks can handle him. You see a bit more removal here, so along with Along Came Zeus, you also have He Hurled His Thunderbolt, and then a couple copies of I Find Him, I Flatten Him to have a decent line into the item deck. This is a very consistent way to run Steel Song, and it's a very powerful deck. Finally, I have one of the most aggressive aggro decks in the format, we could say, and possibly the fastest aggro deck in the format. This is Pudge Go Burr. So what do we have here? Well, let's talk a little bit about Pudge. 2 cost inkable, 1/3. If you have a character named Lilo in play, you may play this character for free. We play 12 Lilos in this deck. We play 4 of the 1 cost, 4 of the 2 cost inkable, and 4 of the 2 cost uninkable. So there's a lot of times that you can just, on turn 1 or turn 2, play a bunch of Pudges to get a good chunk of lore out of the game so quickly. Something as simple as the 2 questing Lilo and a Pudge or 2 Pudges into a Rex on turn 2. Rex is a new card, 2 cost inkable, 3/1 bodyguard. During opponent's turn, when this character is banished, gain 1 lore. That can just push your opponent out of the game so quickly. This is a bit of a high roll deck, and I will not be really discussing this as we're talking mulligans or matchups moving forward. Just understand, if you win the dice roll and you're playing this deck, you have an innate advantage that sometimes your opponent, no matter what deck they're playing, just can't catch up to the sheer volume of lore you have coming at them. Piglet and Nala, two different 2-cost 3 questers. Lilo, which is an absolute nuisance of a card. During each opponent's turn, the first time this character would takes damage, she takes no damage instead. Lady, 3-cost. When you play this character, you may play a character with a cost of 2 or less for free, just to put out a ton of lore, or just to establish your bodyguard early on. Terrifying. The Nani and Doc being the value engines of the deck. This deck is terrifying anytime it's going first. Anytime it's going second, it's a little less terrifying, but you can still squeak out wins against Sapphire and whatnot. I do think this is pretty unfavored into the other 2 Steel Song decks, but the biggest question I see Steel Song players discussing, and one that I've thought a lot on myself, is let the Storm Rage on still worth playing? It hits very few things into the meta. The Snowfort dog deck, the regular dog deck, this does not remove enough targets. There's not enough cards or enough 1-drops that this is really threatening anymore. You're only dealing 2 damage, and it's a 3-cost uninkable in a deck, an archetype full of uninkables. Should you still be playing Storm? To answer you, I think yes. So if you take this out of the deck, it makes everything change. It makes your matchups change. It makes everything change down the line and forms a little bit of a butterfly effect. You still have the fear of this card existing if you don't play it. If you play a Cinderella in turn 1, your opponent may just ink their Amethyst 1-drop that's not able to contend with this card. I think it's very important to have that early answer for a shifted Diablo, that early answer to keep your opponent's hand, or keep your opponent's 1-drops checked. Keep in mind, there will be aggro decks like this at every Infinity tournament you attend. An aggro deck that's not like dogs. This aggro deck's very vulnerable to Let the Storm Rage on. I think that alone is the reason to play Steel Song over other decks. If you don't play Storm, you're not going to magically have a wonderful matchup into Snowfort dogs. It's not going to fix it overnight. Whereas if you do play Storm, you still keep what you do best and things that are strong. And I think that's worth it alone. And I mean, at the end of the day, just shoot your own character and heal with Rapunzel. It's fine enough. It's fine enough. What is Steel Song good into? I've already mentioned it, but it is the destroyer of small aggro decks. I think Steel Song can beat a ton of things in the game, but it really gives a hard time to decks like green-purple, or decks like yellow-purple aggro. I think even just smaller decks in general can have a hard time playing into Steel Song. And then I think you're pretty favored into a lot of Diablo decks. You just keep the bird held down well, and you have a lot of ways to play into Prince John removal. This can be a very skill-focused matchup, especially when concerning a deck like Green Steel, for example. I think largely Steel Song's going to always be pretty favored into a Diablo deck. Your unfavored matchups? Well, these guys look familiar. Blurple is tough to beat with Steel Song. This used to be very Steel Song favored, and if you're a old head Steel Song fan that's coming back to the game, you're like, we beat Blurple, we just whole new world him. Blurple plays with a much lower hand now because they don't need to. They just play Demona. And then Blurple's also maxing out on ward characters. And ward characters, a Merryweather, a Scuttle, just makes it so hard for you to deal with because your removal is useless and your removal is uninkable, and it just makes the game feel clunky for you. Even a card like Dale is very hard to find proper trades into these warded characters, so Blurple will always feel pretty strong against you. And then Obviously, we have dogs once again. As we get later and later into this video, you hear my voice start to fade, and my excitement over talking about dogs beating another deck is really starting to shine. But I do think it's a hard matchup, no matter which dog deck you're playing into. It is rather complex because they have the willpower to fight you. They have Dale to fight your board back if you turn sideways. They have Ursula to remove your songs. It's just not a fun matchup. At the end of the day, though, I think a properly played Steel Song deck can win a lot of matchups. You can force a lot of things into your favor that weren't necessarily that previously. And if this is one of your pet decks or one of your favorite decks, do not feel bad taking this to the DLC. It can definitely, Steel Song will 1000% be in top cut. Your mulligan guide here is going to be fairly simple. You're going to really look for a Cinderella or perhaps an Angel if you're on the draw. You're going to look to combine her with a song, so either Let the Storm Rage On or an Aggro, to perhaps sing on turn 2, perhaps save it and sing on turn 3, whichever. But Cindy Storm is what checks most decks from comfortably playing a 1-drop into you. Just opening up a Cinderella just puts the fear into your opponent's heart that if they don't have a character with at least 3 willpower, they just won't play it if you're playing into a decent enough opponent. And then finally on turn 3, you look to either play an Aerial to add a song back, perhaps an Aggro to play out a character earlier, which could be a beast. You could use the Aggro to go wide. There's a lot of ways to approach this that go a bit further beyond. But at the end of the day, what you're really looking for in the mulligan is Cinderella/Angel plus a song. Overall, my thoughts on Steel Song is it's going to be a very popular deck. Make sure you're comfortable winning the mirror match, and make sure you're comfortable with some answer to dogs. It's a tough matchup. Consider maybe breaking out more Find 'em Platinum, maybe breaking out more copies of Dale to be able to fight back the board earlier. Really think of what you can do to deal with these popular decks. This strategy will 100% find success. I said 1000% earlier. You ask me again, I'll say 10%. Oh God, no. Last but certainly not least, we have Purple Steel. It may surprise you to see this deck competing with the Titans of Infinity, but it certainly can. What does Purple Steel have that makes it different than it does in Core? I think the Merlin cards, the Merlin and the Madam Mims, just give it so much more depth to its play style, where you have all of this burn that makes it look kind of like an aggro deck, but it's not. It's so much more, where you get to establish this inevitable engine of 24 unstoppable lore in this deck build that if the game goes on long enough, you will just burn your opponent out without them having a chance. I think this also plays a little bit like a stun deck to a certain extent, where you have removal for your opponent's key pieces and you have a card like Pete to shut down power plays. Purple Steel is a strong deck for sure. One of the newest boosts to this deck is going to be Genie, a boost 1. I'm only playing 2 copies, but he's still very powerful. This character gets +1 lore for each card under him. Against a deck like Sapphire, this can stack up so quickly. And then to add to our burn arsenal, we have the new Dash Par, 4-cost uninkable, 3/2. Rush 2-quester, and this character can quest on the turn he's played, so he's essentially a burn for 2, but on the next turn, if he survives, you get to burn for 2 more. So this is a great card to follow up on a B prep before your opponent's able to get a character that can check him. This deck's really good at just floating card advantage and just having a ton of cards due to Merlin Rabbit and friends on the other side. And then you just chip away at your opponent until they just have nothing left. One big question mark here is Fire the Cannons or no Fire the Cannons. You may notice my list does not have Fire the Cannons. It's a tough call. Fire the Cannons is a miserable card into the majority of the meta. It's a 1-cost uninkable, deal 2 damage, sure. The big question mark here is this checks Diablo, and my deck here is completely disrespecting Diablo to the utmost extent of disrespect. I have no checks for him outside of our removal songs. And I think I've largely designed the deck to not care. I just want to draw cards, I want to play unavoidable lore, and I want to end the game before my opponent can. It's hard to say not to play Fire the Cannons. It's one of the best checks for Diablo in the game, but outside of that, it hits very few cards, and it's not a character. It's an uninkable that bricks your deck and your hands in some ways. I just don't know if it hits enough right now. That being said, I do think there is a world that you make the call to add 2 copies of this card into your deck. You could just slot it in for the 2 Along Came Zeuses, or you could slot it in for a couple characters somewhere. It's not a hard card to include, but it's one that I very knowingly chose to exclude from my list. What are you favored into? Well, I think you're pretty favored into Ruby Sapphire. You're essentially just inevitable in a lot of ways, and you can just chip away lore, you can just keep cards in your hand and on board, and they just have a hard time dealing with you. They need a way to establish like a Pirate's Life in-game to put you out of the game, and you have Pete to potentially avoid that. I think Prince John is another matchup where you're always going to be favored into these discard decks. You're playing Merlin Rabbit, you're playing Bounce to avoid having to play extra cards, you've got Friends, you've got purple cards in general. It is a tough matchup for Diablo, or it's a tough matchup for discard to win. Purple Steel is the definition of consistency. It's just very good and clean at doing what it does. It does not have the high-end power scaling that a lot of these other decks do. But if you're comfortable with this deck, you can find a lot of success with it. Let's talk unfavored. Oh boy, our friend Tramp is back. Lemon Lime is tough, especially if they're on the Snow Fort build. It can be a very difficult match to win. My deck list here is choosing to maximize on Madam M. Fox and Merlin Crab to have a decent line into those decks to be able to threaten them when they're not really expecting you to be able to. That being said, it can still be a rather complex matchup, especially if they go first. Blurple is very, very hard to win. If you think Purple Steel loses hard to Blurple and Core, just wait till Infinity. These worded characters and everything Blurple's able to do, especially turn 1 Bell, can just give you a lot of issues. And then Amber Steel is statistically a pretty tough matchup. I think Purple Steel can win it, but the fact that if Amber Steel chooses, as we discussed earlier, to play Let the Storm Rage on, it does a fantastic job of checking Purple Steel's early game, even shooting something like a Smee to ensure you only get 1 quest or you're forced to bounce him or something can be enough to curtail your run into it. I have Merlin Crab and Strength over here just to signify as long as Purple Steel has Strength for Raging Fire, they will find a way to go 1, 2, 3 Strength. It's one of the strongest, most consistent things you can do in Lorcana. Mulligan Guide is very simple for Purple Steel. I have 3 cards here. These are not what you're hard mulliganing for. You're looking for a curve. You want to go a 1-drop, a 2-drop, and a 3-drop. Or you want to go a 1-drop, 2 1-drops, and a 3-drop. Sometimes you want to go a 1-drop, a Snake, and a 3-drop, but typically you want to have at least 3 characters on board to ensure your first Strength of a Raging Fire can deal 4 damage. My thoughts on Purple Steel is you can build the deck to be a pretty potent stun deck. You note that we are playing Pete. We could also be playing Keep the Ancient Ways to lock your opponent down, prevent them from doing a lot of these powerful late game deck things. I think Purple Steel can definitely be a solid pick if it's what you enjoy. That being said, I will warn that it can also find itself falling flat in terms of just the power scaling of Infinity. Infinity can do a lot of strong things. But if you're a strong player that values consistency, maybe Purple Steel is just the deck for you. Oh my gosh, we survived. I am running out of a voice, and I am running out of breath. Let's just finish up strong here. What are my thoughts on Infinity? I think Infinity is a skillful format. I think in a lot of ways, it's even more skillful than our current core format. There are a lot of ways that knowing different matchups will come into play, and knowing how your deck interacts in this matchup is huge. Practice makes perfect. I think Infinity is a flawed format. I do think some decks are just built better. How many times did we go through this list and talk about dogs beating a deck? Dogs have the best matchup spread in the game currently. And it's not the easiest deck in the world to counter. You've got some ways, you've got some lines, but at the end of the day, the dog's powerful lines can just overwhelm you before, even if you're playing these silver bullets or these counter cards and counter strategies. But it's flawed but fun. I have a lot of fun playing Infinity. I love the variety of every game. I feel like every game feels different, whereas Core, there's a lot of play character to board, try to retake board, quest out once you have the tempo advantage. Infinity, you have games where your opponent's going to try to burn you with a dime and a bunch of items. You've got games where you're trying to control, and then play a couple locations and let those locations, you just play protect the castle. You've got games like Green Steel where you can have a discard toolbox. Green Steel or Christmas even, where you have a toolbox of cards you can use in your discard to punish your opponent or to have for each particular situation that makes every game feel different and fun. And then my last comment on all of it is I think Infinity, it just knows no limit. You have every card available at your disposal. You have so many powerful things you can try. Maybe your spice is Prince John in blue-green, so you can ramp to a Bend to My Will, or you can play him alongside Basil. Or maybe your spice is you want to combine Ruby with Steel and have some really cool interaction there. Maybe you want to build the strongest location deck Lorcana's ever seen. You can do it. Infinity knows no limit. The power level of the format is so high that you can find success playing decks that aren't necessarily the strongest just because the cards are so incredibly strong in the game through here. Well, that's it. If you're still here, thank you so much for staying tuned. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope this helped you. It definitely was really insightful for me to put all this information together and release it for y'all. And if you enjoyed this, please leave a like, subscribe, do all the fun things. Otherwise, until next time, my friends, I will catch you later. Peace.